What is up, everybody? Welcome to Pub Sports Radio and welcome to Stat Diggers, where we go balls deep into the stats for this upcoming card. This is going to be the second show of the week. Really looking forward to making the return here after last week. Last week was pretty fun. We had a really good turnout. So if you do enjoy this content, if you do like this concept, please leave a like. Me and Uncle Weezy, we put a lot of work into this Sunday show. I was sitting there all day today, doing some tape study. Uncle Weezy was getting all his stats ready. It does take a long time, so we do appreciate all likes. It really does help out. Before we get started, if you guys can leave a like on this video, also subscribe to Pub Sports Radio, that would be awesome. So content throughout the week. Me and Uncle Weezy are doing a video on my channel on Monday, going balls deep into the main event. My full card breakdown will be out on Tuesday as well. You can go check out Uncle Weezy on his channel on YouTube, Uncle Weezy, where he goes balls deep into certain matchups that he does pick and choose. So what's up, everybody in the chat? Thank you for hanging out. We'll get to you in a second, but first we will pass it on to Uncle Weezy. Uncle Weezy, first of all, how was your card last night? And second of all, what do you think of this upcoming card?
Last night was pretty good for me, man. At the gambling window, I kind of felt like I made bets that made sense. Normally, I'll have one or two stinkers, and I'm sick that I made the bet. And this week, I didn't have anything like that, so I was pretty happy with it. DFS was definitely a strange night with so many huge underdogs winning. The optimal lineups probably had about $3,000 in salary left on the table, so it was one of those nights that it was kind of hard to have DFS lineups that were working out. I had a half-unit bet on Alexis Davis by decision that almost cashed, but when you have a bet like that, you'd rather be holding that underdog ticket when it's a close decision like that rather than the favorite. So, and as far as this card coming up, I mean, there's some interesting fights here. We've definitely got some fights where we don't have a lot of data available, so we'll have to kind of lean on the prior experience of the fighters. We got some guys coming off of long layoffs. We got some young fighters. We've got a really old fighter who's fought everybody in the world, and Aleksei Oleinik. This is going to be an interesting card, and I've already got some nuggets for you guys planned for. I'm ready for this show. I'm ready to go balls deep like we always do about this time on Sunday nights, my man. Let's get it. Let's go.
Heck yeah. So what I noticed right off the bat is there is, like you mentioned, there's a lot of fighters that we have not seen in forever. So I kind of forgot about some of these guys. I had to go refresh my memory, watch some tape, and we'll definitely get into that. But first, we will shout out the chat. Thank you, as always, for hanging out. We had PPV Dizzle, first one in the chat. What's up, Sosa? How you doing? Headley1, hopefully I pronounced that right. Let's go. I agree. We got Billy in the chat. What's up, Brady? Uncle Weezy, tough card this week. Yeah, it's interesting. I think this week's going to require a lot of tape study. Lots of guys we might have forgotten about. We have some new guys as well. BP afternoon from London, England. Weezy and DFS last night was amazing. Cash Zion, Anders, Izzy, Riddell. Sadly, I trusted Maya and Hooper, but lessons learned. There you go. Glad you had a good night. Every card has an old guy getting beat down. Yeah, we saw one last night. We'll probably see one this week as well. We have PayPal in the chat. We have Sosa in the chat. Figgy was a big letdown. Never betting on him again. Yeah, I did a recap for last night's card. If you want to go check it out on my channel, DFS by the Numbers, went kind of deep into that as well. Tony in the chat. Hey guys, what's up, Tony? How you doing? Hopefully did well last night. Jeff in the chat. What's up, Jeff Slaughter? If only I had Stat Diggers show a year ago. Yeah, I mean, this is something that hopefully we get to keep on doing. Hopefully people like it. It's really fun to, take an early look into next week. It definitely helps me out. So hopefully it does help a lot of you guys out as well. Figgy lost me 700. My goodness. Oh my goodness. Yeah, sorry about that, Sosa. All right, you're new to the chat. Welcome. Let's make some more money. I agree. So yeah, for me, last week was pretty good. My night really came down to the Paul Craig and Jamal Hill fight finishing. Had 6.5 units invested on that total. Not much of a sweat there, but was glad to get that done. This week, I do have one bet so far, but it's probably going to be like a light-ish week for me just by first look, but there are some spots to stick out. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about some betting and much more. But first, we will start with the first fight of the night, which bear with me on the order of the bouts. Tapology has, different things, and they're probably going to switch up throughout the week. So I don't know if this is actually going to be the first fight of the night yet, but as of now, it is. So first fight of the night, we have Matt Semmelsberger versus Chaos Williams. We have Semmelsberger, who is 28 years old, 6'1", 75-inch reach. We have Chaos Williams, who is 27 years old, 6 foot. 77-inch reach. So Chaos Williams is going to have a 2-inch reach advantage and a 1-inch height disadvantage. So taking a look at the last 5 for Semelsberger. So he knocked out Jason Witt in like 10, 15 seconds. That was pretty hilarious. Beat Carlton Minus. Those are kind of his notable wins there. And then as far as Chaos Williams, he lost to Michel Pereira. He beat Abdulrazak Al-Hassan. I believe he knocked him out with a jab. And then he beat Alex Moreno when he came in on short notice, beat him in like 30 seconds. So, right off the bat, Weezy, I think this is going to be, it could be fight of the night. Like, these are 2 guys that are going to probably stand in the middle and bang until one man falls. So kind of get into the stats in this one and tell me how you see it.
Yeah, man. Couple of young bucks here. Semelsberger 28 and Chaos is 27. And they both got a ton of power in their hands. So this is going to be a really fun one to watch. Like you just went over, this guy went through Al-Hassan and Moreno in maybe about a minute combined, knocking them down with like the first punches that he was landing. So Chaos Williams is definitely a hot prospect. And the fact that these guys are in their late 20s, they're getting better still. So that's exciting. When we look at the pro experience, both of these guys, we got Chaos Williams with 13 fights and Semelsberger with 10. We see the cage time is very much similar, and the average fight time is very much similar, and the career length is almost identical. So, we see that the experience in both the UFC and just overall is about the same. Semelsberger's 2-0 in the UFC, Chaos Williams 2-1. If we look at the finish stats, we'll see that Semelsberger finishes 63% of his wins by KO and 13% of them by sub. So he's got a 76% finish rate in his 8 wins. And, it'd be 75. But then Chaos Williams, 55% of his overall wins by knockout, 9% by sub. So that would be 64% overall finish rate in his 11 wins. And Semelsberger has 2 losses, and he has been finished in both of them. Once by sub, once by KO, and Chaos Williams in his 2 losses has never been finished. Where the interesting part of the breakdown comes is with the striking statistics with these guys. Semelsberger right now, 7.93 significant strikes landed per minute out of 15.59 offered. Crazy volume, over 50% accuracy with that kind of volume is very impressive. And he's also got a 1.65% knockdowns per total significant strikes landed. Those are great power numbers, showing 1.97 knockdowns per 15 minutes. And then we know Chaos Williams, 4.39 strikes landed out of 9.66 per minute for 45% accuracy, but a 2.86 significant strikes, knockdowns per significant strikes landed ratio. That's massive, especially for a welterweight. That's like heavyweight power coming from a welterweight. 1.88 knockdowns per 15 minutes. He completely just destroyed Moreno and Al-Hassan. But then Pereira, he went 15 minutes with and wasn't able to land one of those bombs. So we kind of saw him come back down to earth, but nobody holds up that kind of pace for long. You don't stay in the UFC just starching dudes in the first round over and over and over again unless you're going to be a champion. Defensively, we got Semelsberger with 56% striking defense. Chaos Williams, 44% striking defense. Both of these guys are out-ratioing their opponents in a pretty impressive way. 7.93 significant strikes landed per minute for Semelsberger while only absorbing 5.31. And Chaos Williams, 4.39 landed per minute, only absorbing just under 3. So they're both ratioing their opponents in an impressive way for the striking. And I think that's really kind of like, when we're breaking down this fight, that's the most important thing to break down. We don't know much about the grappling games of either of these guys at this point. If we look at the grappling statistics, Semelsberger 2 of 2 on his takedown attempts. He's averaging 1.97 takedowns per 15 minutes. But that was against Carlton Minus. The Jason Witt fight didn't last long. So, and we see Chaos Williams, he's only attempted 1 takedown. In terms of control time, Semelsberger has 18% control time while not yielding any control time. Very impressive. While Chaos Williams fights have had about less than 13% of total control time. So we got to believe that this fight takes place on the feet, which is where we want it to take place as fans, because seeing 2 guys with power like this is exciting. And if we look at the strength of schedule, not much to tell here. Chaos Williams has definitely fought the better brand of competition here. As we see, Semelsberger, his only 2 fights in the UFC coming against Witt and Minus, definitely lower echelon, if not the bottom of the barrel of the welterweight division for Semelsberger. While Chaos Williams, he made his debut against Alex Morono. And Morono's got over 10 UFC fights. So, coming in against a veteran with a winning record like that, it's impressive, especially the way he starched him. And then Abdul Razak Al Hassan, that was quick. And then the Pereira fight, Pereira's huge for the division, much bigger than Chaos. And he kind of just used his size in order to outbox him from the outside. But this is going to be an interesting fight. I'm definitely leaning Williams from what I've seen so far in terms of the power numbers and the level of competition. But Semelsberger is almost as experienced as Williams. I kind of thought Williams would have a little more experience, but it's really pretty much the same. So what are you these numbers making you lean one way or the other on this one, Brady?
Yeah, I'll get to that in a second, but first do want to point out a dono. Don't ask, don't tell with the $5 dono. Appreciate that. Dig into the new show. Really do appreciate that. Hopefully you guys do like it. I like it myself. It actually does help me out quite a bit to kind of get like an early look into the week. But yeah, as far as this fight goes, like I said, this could be, definitely a potential fight of the night. 2 guys that are not scared to go in there and bang. 2 guys with power. I guess the things that do stick out to me is going to be the average fight time. I know Williams has only had 3 fight sample, Semelsberger a 2 fight sample, but Williams 5.32 average fight time, and then Semelsberger 7.63. So we'll take a look at the odds, and they're wise to it. The bookmakers are wise to it. They opened the over-under at 1.5, and the under is sitting at plus 110. So I don't know. I feel like there could be an early finish. I'm not digging that under as far as the money line goes. Chaos Williams minus 170. Matthew Semelsberger is plus 150. I think what stuck out to me the most is going to be, Semelsberger has been finished in both of his losses, as you have Chaos Williams, who has never been finished. So kind of in a fight where I think, hey, someone's probably getting finished here. First glance, I do got to lean on the Chaos Williams side. I do have to tape this fight, though. And then also the level of competition does go to Williams by a significant margin. I mean, Carlton Minus could be one of the worst UFC fighters to ever enter the octagon. I mean, and that's not even a joke. I don't even think he's on the roster anymore. Jason Witt has, probably one of the worst chins, in UFC history. So I do think that Williams has fought the much, much, much better competition. I mean, knocking out Abdul Razak Al Hassan, it's not an easy thing to do. Knocking out Alex Morono in 30 seconds is not an easy thing to do. So first look for me, going to be Chaos Williams, but I still need to tape the fight. But regardless, I do think it's going to be a banger. I was looking, towards maybe some violence, maybe like a Williams by knockout. Williams inside the distance could be something to look at, but I do think someone's getting finished in this fight regardless. So we'll take a look at this next fight. And man, I tried to pronounce this guy's name. I was practicing earlier in the day. Nikolai Negam. I'm not even going to pronounce it. We'll call him Nikolai, going against Aleksei Kamer. Interesting fight here. Light heavyweight, we have Nick Alai, who is 26 years old, 6 foot, 78-inch reach. He's going to have a 4-inch reach advantage compared to Kamer, who is 25 years old, 6'1", 74-inch reach. And as far as the last 5 go, we have Nikolai, who I believe is taking a pretty significant layoff. I don't remember how long it's been, but I think it's been a couple of years. He lost to Saperbeg Safarov in his only UFC fight, I do believe. And then as far as Kamer, he did lose to William Knight. He beat Justin Ledet. And then he beat Fabio Charant on the Contender Series with it was like a flying knee, and then finished him after that. So, yeah, interesting fight, kind of a low-level fight. I did some tape on it. I do got to do a little bit more. I am leaning K more. So, what do you have as far as the stats go, Uncle Weezy?
Yeah, this is what, like you said, it's low level. If we go to Tapology, we can bring that up real quick. I want to show you guys something here for the guy that we're just going to call Nikolai here, because that last name is crazy. So that fight against Saperbeg Safarov was, if you guys want to see a funny fight, check that fight out. Safarov grabs the cage, I think, 30 times. I'm not exaggerating. He grabbed the cage 30 times. Leon Roberts was physically taking his hands out of the cage over and over and over again. You had Paul Felder from the broadcast booth screaming, "This guy is a dirty fighter," about Safarov. It was such a disaster. And I mean, you want to talk about a low-level fight. Safarov against Nikolai was maybe about as low level as it's ever gotten in the light heavyweight division. We see that our guy here, the Romanian, he has a win over the venerable Yuri Gorbanko, who's 12-50 as a mixed martial artist. Tough guy though, but he's just went on a little bit of a skid lately with a 24-fight losing streak. But one of the funny things about Gorbanko is I think it's kind of like it's a requirement that you've whooped this guy's ass if you're ever going to get into the UFC. Shamil Gamzatov, Sergey Spivak, Ayan Kutalaba, Andrei Kovalev, Vitaly Shemetov, Romanov, Espino, and then Nagaramanyu. All these guys have beaten this bum Yuri Gorbanko, who's 12-50, like I said. So low-level fight, really widely lined. From what I saw from the Romanian guy was that he's got some decent judo throws. He's got really good top control when he does get on top. His striking is super low level. It looked horrible in the Safarov fight, and I watched even a couple of his regional scene fights, and there's not a lot there, but the guy does fight like he's double parked, man. I mean, he finishes quick for the most part. He's got a lot of finishes in the first round, in the first 3 minutes. He has went late into fights too and shown some decent conditioning. And, the thing is about both of these guys, Nikolai is 26 and Kamer's 25. So even though we haven't seen much out of either of these guys, and Kamer certainly did not look impressive against William Knight in his last fight, they're both young. They're both probably getting better, but the line is really wide. And we'll see that Nikolai has a 100% finish rate, 67% by TKO, 33% by sub, while Kamer is a knockout artist. 83% of his wins have come by knockout, none by sub. Neither one of these guys has ever been finished, but they've both only lost one fight. If we look at the UFC striking statistics for Nikolai, he lands 0.73 and absorbs 4.67. That's because Safarov took him down several times and controlled him, so he really wasn't able to get any offense off. He was dominated by Safarov and really absorbed a lot of really nasty ground and pound in that fight. Kamer, we've seen Kamer in the Ledet and Charant fights. He beat Charant on the Contender Series. He beat Ledet by decision, who's, a low-level light heavyweight. William Knight just got absolutely bodied by Dan Jung in his last fight, but yet he was able to pretty much destroy Kamer. What I'm just going to, instead of going too far into these statistics, can we put the 1-800-GAMBLER number up, Brady, because this is one of those fights, man. Please don't gamble on this fight, please. They're both low level. This line is way too wide. One of the things that I was talking with the guys in the Discord about a while back, it's one of my personal philosophies when I bet. It is that I want to be betting on a fighter instead of against a fighter. And I found myself making bets over the last few months where I bet against bums that really should have lost. Like, for instance, Khalil Roundtree against Marcin Prachnio. You see Prachnio go out there and get starched in the first round in 3 consecutive fights, and then you just say to yourself, well, I'm betting against Prachnio. And then you wind up paying almost minus 300 for whoever's fighting Prachnio because you think he's a bum. Well, I think, Nikolai's a bum probably, but Kamer shouldn't be a minus 270 favorite against anybody. I mean, not the way he looked against William Knight. I mean, if you come to the UFC and you can't finish Justin Ledet, you shouldn't be betting on this guy. And then at the same time, you don't want to bet on this guy, on this Romanian dude either. Thank you. Finally, 1-800-GAMBLER. Hey, Brady, you're the man. That's awesome. So don't bet on this fight. The statistics really can't tell us much because there's not much of a sample size. The line is too wide. Both of these guys are too inexperienced. And Nikolai is on a 2-year and 3-month layoff.
Yeah.
So he could, and he he looked good in his regional scene footage. He's got decent judo. He's got a good mixed martial arts skill set, with the exception of his striking is really low level, but Kamer's striking is not great either, So, yeah, this is a big stay away for me. I am not betting this fight, but I'm kind of excited to see it because these guys are both young, and if one of these guys can put together an eye-catching performance, it'll move them up the ladder. What do you got for this one?
Yeah, Preston mentions it right here. Betting on Kamer at -250, no thanks. So yeah, like you mentioned, a good point. Like we haven't seen him in about 2 years. The guy's only 26. So the last time we saw him fight was 24. And it's one of those cases where, hey, maybe he did make a ton of improvements in those 2 years off. We just don't know. But yeah, I would not recommend betting on this fight. But what I did find interesting, like you said, both guys are finishers. Nikolai has that 100% finish rate. Kamer has a ton of finishes as well by knockout. They set the under at 2.5 rounds. The under is plus 120, plus 125, and the fight doesn't go to decision is plus 100. So do you think there could potentially be a finish in this fight?
Absolutely. It's a low-level fight. And I didn't have time to tape Kamer today, but I do remember the performances that I've seen from him. He looked great against Charant. But everybody that I've seen fight Charant that's been UFC caliber has looked good against him. So I can't get too over the moon about that performance. XL Mellon cracking me up there. But yeah, I could definitely see a finish though, because like I say, from what I saw from the Romanian dude, his ground game and his ability to get the fight to the ground is actually pretty good. So, if you were going to bet this fight, if you are a degenerate and you don't want to call 1-800-GAMBLER, yeah, the under might not be a bad look for this one. It's certainly better than laying -250 to -270 on Aleksei Kamer. And I mean, I just don't want to, even if I'm getting plus 200 on Nikolai, I feel like that would be dead money because, I don't know if he's made any improvements. I don't know if he's gotten any better. I don't even know where the dude trains. He's in Romania.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'd stay away. Thomas Howard, okay, I'm off Kamer. I mean, he could win. It's just the -250 part is it's low level. You don't want to bet -250 on him.
Yeah, you can have him in DraftKings, for instance, if you think he's going to win. You don't have to lay -270 in DraftKings. You just got to pay up a little bit for the salary.
Yeah.
And it's just, this line is just too wide. And what you're doing is you're betting against Nikolai rather than – you're not really thinking, oh, is Kamer going to be -270 here? You're kind of just saying, oh, he should beat this guy. But maybe he won't. It's a fight. And they're both UFC caliber, so anybody can win. Yeah, man, I'm not betting this one, but the under might be a decent look.
Yeah, I don't hate the under first look. I do have to tape it more myself, but I did tape this next fight, and I got a pretty strong lean on as well. We have Casey O'Neill going against Laura Procopio. We have Casey O'Neill, who is 23 years old, 5'6", 69-inch reach, and Laura Procopio, who is 25 years old, 5'4", 67-inch reach. So O'Neill is going to have a 2-inch reach advantage and a 2-inch height advantage as far as their last couple of notable fights. We saw Casey O'Neill come in and absolutely dominate Shanna Dobson in her UFC debut. I do want to talk more about that fight later after you go through the stats. And then Laura Procopio, she beat Molly McCann, and then she lost to Carol Rosa. In that Rosa fight, she was actually fighting up a weight class, and we also will get more into that fight as well. But yeah, very, very good matchup here. Really looking forward to seeing it. I don't really want to give away who I'm picking as of yet, but I'll kind of let you get into the stats here. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to this fight.
Really looking forward to this one too. And there's something about, in your Discord when we talk fights, something about the women's fights that always wind up controversial. People either wind up on one side or the other, and for some reason they get way more passionate about lower level women's fights than they do sometimes like the championship fights, but the key stats here: Casey O'Neill, 23 years old, Laura Procopio, 25 years old. Both of these girls are babies, and from what we've seen from them, they look good. Both of them look really good. O'Neill in her debut she came all the way from Australia. At 22 years old, she made her debut. And under those bright lights, she was not the moment wasn't too big for her. She really stepped up. She laid her game plan out beautifully, got 4 out of 6 takedowns, dominated Shannon Dobson, and really, she looked exactly how you would want a prospect to look when they come in and they make their UFC debut, even if it's against the bum. And then Procopio, in her debut, she's fighting up a weight class.
Yeah.
She's fighting at 135 against Karol Rosa, and Karol Rosa is having a hard time getting fights right now. I mean, people don't – 135ers don't want to fight Karol Rosa. So the fact that Procopio took Rosa to a split decision in a striking match when Procopio's strength is her Brazilian jiu-jitsu, another really impressive performance. Let's get into the numbers. Procopio, 8 pro fights. O'Neal, 6. Length of career, Casey O'Neal, 2 years, 2 months. Procopio, 5 years, 9 months. Procopio, 2 UFC fights to O'Neal's 1. Both of Procopio's fights went to decision with an average fight time of 15 minutes. Casey O'Neal finished her fight in 8.68 minutes. We have got Casey O'Neal with a 50% overall finish rate, 33% by KO, 17% by sub, while Procopio, a 43% finish rate, 29% by sub, 14 by KO. Neither one of these ladies has ever been finished. Procopio is the only one who even has a loss. If we look at the striking numbers, we see that Casey O'Neal has a 72% striking accuracy. That's because it was ground strikes. 5.64 attempted, 5.64 landed out of 7.83 attempted, while Procopio 6.7 landed out of 11.6 attempted. So high volume from both of them. They haven't shown the power yet in the UFC. The ratio for O'Neal is ridiculous because she dominated Shanna. 5.64 landed, 1.84 absorbed. And we see that Procopio is actually absorbing more than she's landing at 6.7 landed, 6.93 absorbed. But that fight with Rosa was a very, very high volume fight. Procopio with the better striking defense, 47% compared to 42 for Casey. And Procopio has been knocked down 0.5 times per 15 minutes. The grappling stats is what's really going to be interesting here. Casey O'Neal was 4 for 6 on takedowns. 6.91 takedowns per 15 minutes and 1.73 sub attempts for an 85.6% control time, while she was only controlled 2.5% of the time by Shanna. But, small sample size, we can't get too over the moon about that. Procopio, 7 out of 14 on her takedowns for 50%, 3.5 per 15 minutes, and a 40% control time, while only yielding 6% control time. So Procopio has racked up 40% control time. But if we go over to the advanced stats, can you get those up on the screen?
Yes, sir.
I just want to show you guys for Procopio here. Her first fight with Karol Rosa, we can see that the control time was 22 seconds for Procopio and 64 for Rosa. But then we move on to the next fight, and it was 703 seconds of control time for Procopio while only yielding 50. So we can see that against Rosa, Procopio wasn't able to use her Brazilian jiu-jitsu. She wasn't really able to get her takedown game going. She was 0 of 5 on takedowns against Rosa, who has excellent takedown defense. So we didn't see her rack up the control time there. However, even without her Brazilian jiu-jitsu game, she had a really good striking-based performance, landing 165 significant strikes in 15 minutes while absorbing 171. So, a very high volume match. So what that tells me is that when Lara can't get her Brazilian jiu-jitsu game going, she does have the ability to get it done on the feet. That's very important. We always want to have money on well-rounded mixed martial artists that have more than one path to victory. So I found that to be important. Let's go back, though, now to the matchup template here. The strength of schedule, not that important. We can just kind of tell. O'Neal's fought Shanna Dobson. Lara Procopio has fought McCann and Rosa, a higher level of competition for Procopio. So really this is going to come down to the grappling, I think. Who gets their takedowns. And if you go and you watch some tape on Casey O'Neal, she has been taken down. She has been reversed. But her top game was excellent against Shanna Dobson. But there's probably a reason why her top game was great against Shanna Dobson. Maybe you want to enlighten us on that, Brady.
Yeah, so yeah, very interesting. I guess one thing I do want to point out that yeah, I was very high on Casey in her fight against Shanna Dobson. I want to say she was like at like minus 160, minus 170. And I think an important thing to point out going to the Dobson fight is Dobson came into that fight with a 0% takedown defense. And after that fight, she came out with a 14%. I believe Dobson has been cut since then. I could be wrong. But if she hasn't been cut yet, she will be cut in the future. I know she pulled, one of the biggest upsets in UFC history against Maria Agapova, but we got to remember that Agapova did gas out quite a bit. So, yeah, man, this fight is very good. I actually did probably way too much tape on this fight. I watched every single fight possible, spent like 2 hours on it, and actually really like Laura Procopio. You brought up some good points that in her fight where, first of all, it was up a weight class, and second of all, she could not get Rosa to the ground, the much bigger fighter. She landed 165 significant strikes. That's unbelievable. And she won that fight on one of the judges' scorecards, which is crazy. And Carol Rosa, she's a pretty good fighter. So as far as, the striking goes, I got to favor Laura Procopio. I know we think of her as, a really good black belt, a really good grappler, and she is, but her striking is very good. I love the volume. Casey O'Neill's very hittable. So I think, Laura's going to have success on the feet. And then as far as the wrestling goes, yes, Casey O'Neill's wrestling, it looked really good against Shanna Dawson, but going back and looking at some of the tape, I wasn't as impressed. I think she has some really good wrestling, some really good takedowns. It's just, it wasn't as good as I thought it would look like. And I had seen her get taken down very, very easily. I saw her get reversed twice. And I don't really think you want to mess around on the mat with, a really credentialed grappler in Laura Procopio, who, has really good wrestling herself. Like, I was really impressed with the wrestling and the takedowns of Procopio. Like, she took down Molly McCann 7 times. Like, that's not easy to do. So as far as the striking, I give in favor to Procopio. As far as the wrestling, I honestly give it in favor to Procopio. Casey, it's close, and then as far as the, jiu-jitsu, I give it a massive advantage to Laura there. So I like Laura quite a bit in this fight. Casey O'Neill, the only thing that concerns me is, like, she's very young. She's 23 years old. So we're going to see massive improvements fight by fight. It's just, I don't want to look too far into Shanna Dobson when her ground game is very bad. So I like Laura here. Uncle Weezy, who are you liking?
I just put a bet actually on Laura here just before the show started, because it looks like she came in as maybe like a minus 150 favorite, and then a bunch of money came in on O'Neal. Yeah. And actually drove the line down to very close to a pick'em. And I was thinking to myself, maybe the hype's just going to let this line flip. But then when I woke up the next day, it had already moved back. And I just got it at minus 121 on DraftKings about 10 minutes before the show started. Might still be there. But yeah, I put a 1.5 unit bet on Laura here because I think not only is she more experienced, but it looks like she's more well-rounded at this point. Yeah. And being more well-rounded at a young age and really having that one massive advantage in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu really makes me feel like this is a pretty safe bet here. But the one thing that we don't know is how much better Casey's gotten in the last year, and she looked damn good in her last performance.
Heck yeah. So we'll take a look at the odds here. And yeah, like you mentioned, there has been some line movement, some early love coming in on the Casey O'Neil side, but we now have Laura Procopio now at minus 140, Casey O'Neil at plus 120. And, honestly, like, I do expect that line to be, even wider as the week goes on once people start getting into the tape. You take a look at the Tapology predictions, and it's all love for Casey O'Neil. Maybe it's because she's the better looking fighter. Maybe because she left a really good memory in people's minds of the Shanna Dobson domination. But at the end of the day, it was Shanna Dobson. So give me Laura Procopio there as far as a pick. That's something I taped already, and I probably spent way too much time on it, but I really wanted to go through the careers of both fighters. All right, very, very interesting fighter here. We have Joaquim Silva going against Rick Glenn. We have Silva, who is 32 years old, 5'8", 69-inch reach. And we have Glenn, who is 32 years old, 6 foot, 70-inch reach as far as the notable opponents. Silva, we have not seen him fight in, I want to say, like 2019. It's been a couple years, and his last loss was against Nasrat Haqparast. He did have a KO win over Jared Gordon. He lost a decision to Vince Pichel. As far as Rick Glenn, he lost to Kevin Aguilar, and this fight was like 3 years ago. So this is a huge layoff for Rick Glenn. And I know Rick Glenn was supposed to come back, and I think he was supposed to fight Carlton Minus, but he pulled out due to, I want to say, COVID. So he was going to come back a couple months ago, but I think he had to pull out due to COVID there. So, yeah, big layoff for Rick Glenn. Prior to that, he did win over Dennis Bermudez, and then he lost to Miles Jury, and then he beat Gavin Tucker, a fight that he absolutely dominated Gavin Tucker. But yeah, interesting fight here. Uncle Weezy, let's get into the stats.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, that performance by Rick Glenn against Gavin Tucker was, man, that was one for the ages. That was an ass whooping. And we've seen a lot of variance in the performances of Rick Glenn. And you brought it up. Rick Glenn's last fight was against Kevin Aguilar, November 30th, 2018. Man, that is a long layoff. I mean, how the hell do we know what we're going to get out of Rick Glenn after a 3-year layoff? That's crazy. It's hard to know what's going to be there. And then if you look at Neto BJJ, Mr. Silva, he last fought August 3rd, 2019. So this is two guys coming off of a massive, massive layoff here. It's hard to know what to think. But if we get into the numbers, we see that Rick Glenn has a serious advantage here in the pro experience, where we see 287 minutes of cage time for Rick Glenn in his career, as opposed to only 88 for Joaquim Silva. We see that Rick Glenn's had a 14-year career, and he's only 32 years old. So, but he's been fighting professionally since the age of 18. And Joaquim Silva, 32 years old, been fighting for 10 years. So he started when he was 22. Both of these guys have 6 UFC fights. Joaquim Silva's 4-2. Rick Glenn is 3-3. Rick Glenn has never been finished or finished a fight in the UFC. 100% of his fights have went to decision, while Joaquim Silva has an average fight time of 10.64 minutes in the UFC. So finish stats. Obviously, Rick Glenn never finished anybody in the UFC, but he has got a 52% knockout percentage and a 19% sub. So 71% of his pro wins have come by finish, while for Joaquim Silva, it is 82% of his pro wins that have come by finish. We have seen Rick Glenn lose by submission twice in his career out of his 6 losses, and Joaquim Silva, in his 2 losses, he's been knocked out once. So both of these guys have been finished. If we look at the stats here, the striking stats, we see that Joaquim Silva has a 38% striking accuracy. That is not great. 3.92 strikes per minute out of 10.33 attempted. And we see that Rick Glenn lands 4.31 out of 10.17. Both of these guys have landed some knockdowns, 0.4% knockdown per significant strikes ratio for Silva. That ratio is 0.26% for Glenn, 0.24 knockdowns per 15 minutes for Silva, 0.17 for Glenn. As far as defense goes, we see that Silva has got a 56% striking defense. Rick Glenn has got a 53% striking defense. Both of these guys have been knocked down, 0.26% for Glenn, 0.35% for Silva. When we look at the grappling statistics, Joaquim Silva has only attempted 2 takedowns in his 6 UFC fights. He's gotten one of them. He's only had 4.49% control time, while Rick Glenn has attempted 29 takedowns in his 6 fights, so almost 5 takedown attempts per fight for Glenn, but he's only gotten 4 takedowns for a 13.79% takedown percentage. So he tries takedowns, he just doesn't get them that often. He has had 17% control time, while his opponents have controlled him 20% of the time, while Silva's been controlled 18% of the time and only controlled his opponents about 4.5% of the time. So it looks like both of these guys have defended a lot of takedowns in their UFC careers, while Silva has defended 28, 18 of them successfully, and Rick Glenn has got a 66% takedown defense, as he's successfully defended 22 of 33 against him. So in terms of the strength of schedule, both got 6 fights, so we'll look at that overall ratio. We see a 1.73 ratio for Silva, a 1.17 ratio for Glenn. But Glenn has fought the more experienced fighters with 10.5 total fights as opposed to 5 for Silva. So the average record of a Joaquim Silva opponent is 3.17 wins, 1.83 losses, while the average record for a Rick Glenn opponent is 5.67 wins, 4.83 losses. Silva's wins have been a little bit better in ratio, and also his losses have been to better competition in ratio. But we see that Rick Glenn, even though the ratio is not as good, he's fighting the more experienced opponents. So This is another one, man. 2 huge layoffs.
Yep.
They're both 32 years old, so I don't know how much better each one of them are getting at this point. We don't have a lot of information between 2018 for Rick Glennon now and 2019 for Joaquim Silva and now. I have not looked at the tape on this one, so I'm not going to be irresponsible and give a prediction here for you guys. But I've seen a little, I mean, like Rick Glenn has caught my eye a little bit more. In terms of the competition levels, I'd say they're pretty similar. This is screaming stay away from me because of the layoffs. But in addition to that, as I just took you through all the statistics here, I'm not seeing a big advantage either way here. I don't know what you're thinking.
Yeah, I mean, right off the bat, like the layoffs, you scare me away from a betting perspective. I can't bet on this fight either way. You have Rick Glenn, who's taken like nearly a 3-year layoff, and then Silva, who's taken nearly a 2-year layoff. So right then and there, I mean, it's just not worth betting. BP brings up a good point here. So Silva or Patch just got done taping this. Glenn is moving up from lightweight to featherweight. Silva looking in amazing shape as per usual. Silva could get a finish. Yeah, so this is going to be I believe his second fight, Rick Glenn, at lightweight. I think he fought earlier in his career in the UFC at lightweight, and he lost. I forget who it was against, but he did lose that fight. So we'll take a look at the odds here. We have Rick Glenn opening up plus 120. He's now minus 105, and Silva opening up minus 150, now minus 115. So money's actually coming in on the Rick Glenn side. Yeah, I would not recommend betting on this fight. I do have to do some tape work myself, but it's just the layoffs that, scream stay far, far away from this fight. You have the over set at 2.5. It's juiced to minus 245. I do think it does hit over, but that's not really worth playing that. Yeah, for me, it's a pass. I'm not going to give a prediction as of yet, but I don't know. I'm not even going to give a lean. I'd stay away personally.
Yeah, and shout out BP. It's a great call by him. Rick Glenn made his debut in the UFC against Evan Dunham at 155. Every fight after that was at 145. He's 32 years old. He's probably sick of making that weight cut. So he is moving up here. That is a great piece of information there. I was planning on bringing that up because I have it in my advanced stats, but thanks for BP for calling that out. That's a big factor in this fight. 10 pounds makes a big difference.
Yeah, good call there. Fade on DK. Do they have the salaries out already or no?
I haven't seen DK salaries, but I could check that out right now to see if they are out. But I haven't seen anything yet.
Yeah, I haven't looked, but yeah, even on DraftKings, I don't know. I'd probably stay away as well, but we'll have to see. Early money
salaries for DK, by the way, not yet.
No salaries. Okay, but we do have 93 in here. If you guys can hit the like, let's try to get to 100. That'd be cool. Get 100 in here on a Sunday, hanging out with us. We really do appreciate that. Hit the like, subscribe here to Pub Sports Radio. We have content going on throughout the week. Lots of great guys on here. But yeah, we'll get to the next fight here. And yeah, man, I think I might as well just keep the 1-800 Gambler up here because we have a very interesting fight. Josh Parisian going against Royk Martinez. We have Parisian, who is 31 years old, 6'4", 79-inch reach. So he's going to have a massive height advantage and reach advantage as we see Martinez, 35 years old, the older guy, 5'10". That's a 6-inch height advantage, 72-inch reach. That is a 7-inch reach advantage. Right off the bat, that does stick out. So we'll take a look at the strength or the last 5 fights here. So Parker Porter against Josh Parisian. He lost that fight. Remember, it was a kind of a very exciting fight for heavyweight standards. He KO'd Chad Johnson, KO'd Marcus Maulding, and 2 more KO wins on his record. So 4-1 in his last 5 fights. As far as Martinez, he did lose to Dontel Mays, and he lost to Alexander Romanov by submission. I do remember in that Romanov fight, he did last a lot longer than people did expect. So Uncle Weezy, kind of right off the bat, it does, seem like a pretty big shit show, but who are you leaving to here?
Yeah, the thing about Martinez is the dude is a veteran. He's stupid tough. Actually, both of these guys. I said last week you'd have to hit some of these guys in the head with a shovel to knock them down. These are guys who could take that shovel shot and then just keep coming at you. They're both ridiculously tough. But yeah. Martinez is a good boxer. He's got great boxing, but he's really undersized. He's really undersized for a heavyweight. 5'10" compared to 6'4" for Parisian. So, and Parisian is somebody who's used his top game really well when he has hurt people. He can take people down. He can dominate them on top. And, and he's like a true 265-pound heavyweight, while Martinez is, he kind of weighs in around 230, 240, and about 40 pounds of that is on his gut. So, but Martinez is one of those guys who, if you underestimate this dude's hands, you do it at your own peril, because he's fought. I mean, you look at who he's fought in his career. He's fought a lot of studs, a lot of them, and we can go through some of them here, because I think it's important to know that this guy Martinez, while he was fighting on the regional scene, he was definitely fighting guys that were going on to the UFC, and I just want to bring that up for you guys. So I'm looking at Martinez here, who's 15-7-2, and here's some of the names on his resume. So Dante Mays, Alexander Romanov, the Honey Bear Jake Hune, Mirko Krokop, he fought in 2018 at the end of his career, Jerome LeBanner, Jadeep Singh, Da Un Jung, and that's what I've got for you. I mean, that's a pretty good list for a guy that came out of Guam and was fighting in Japan most of his life. So the thing about Martinez is he's got really nice hands, but he's going to be really undersized here. If we look at the stats, Parisian, 77% of his wins by knockout, 15% by sub. So he is definitely a finisher. 92% of his wins are by finish. Martinez, 53% of his wins by knockout, 20% by sub. Almost a 75% finish rate. When you talk about how these guys lose fights, Parisian has 4 pro losses, one of them by sub, one of them by KO, 2 by decision, while Martinez has 7 career losses, 2 of them by sub, 2 of them by KO. So both of these guys have been finished in a number of ways. Parisian, 7.46 strikes landed out of 14.48. And I mean, let's just think about that for a second. 14.48 strikes per minute attempted by a heavyweight who weighs 265 pounds. We saw that kind of volume in the Collier fight yesterday, where they were throwing a lot of volume. And Parisian is, even though he's a big man, he puts a pace on people, and that's something that's very dangerous at this level. And we look at the power numbers, a 1.32% knockdown per total significant strikes landed, for 1.48 knockdowns per 15 minutes. Roque has not landed a knockdown yet in the UFC. And in the grappling statistics, Parisian has not even attempted a takedown, while he's been taken down 2 out of 6 times. Parisian has been controlled about 4 times as much as he's controlled his opponents. And we see the same number for Roque, actually. Roque has controlled his opponents 11% of the time, while being controlled about 44%. So both of these guys have shown that they have, that they can be controlled in the cage. So I'm looking at this fight for when I'm looking at a potential path to victory, I want to know which one of these guys has the ability to control the other one. Roque is going to have nicer, faster hands, but Parisian's going to have more power. And if Parisian can get this fight to the ground, I don't think Roque Martinez is going to be able to get him off. Roque, a bit of a journeyman, 15 wins, 7 losses, 2 draws. I'm leaning Parisian here. I would need to tape this. I want to see how Parisian does get top control when he does get it, because that's important. He's 0 for 0 in takedown attempts, but that's really only in the Parker Porter fight, because we don't. While I do have stats in the Chad Johnson fight, that one ended so fast that I don't know if Josh Parisian really does try to get takedowns. And I would like to see him get takedowns against Roque if I want to feel safe about betting him. I just see him as the much bigger guy, the much more powerful guy, and the guy with more ways to win. But I'm not shorting Roque Martinez's hands. Which way are you leaning on this one?
Yeah, very, very interesting fight. I think the size just jumps right out to me. I can't wait to see him at weigh-ins. I do have to tape it more myself, but yeah, interesting point that if you can't get it down to the mat, I think you can have some success. But we'll take a look at the odds here. And kind of interesting, I did expect it to be a little bit wider, but Parisian actually opened up -170. He's currently -130. So it looks like some money is coming in on Roque Martinez, opening up +140, currently +110. Maybe people are sleeping on Parisian a little bit. because of his last performance. I don't know. As far as the over-unders go, they set it at 1.5. Somebody in the chat mentioned over 1.5 rounds. I honestly don't hate that. Minus 140 for the over 1.5. It's not terrible. Both guys, like you mentioned, are very, very tough. The fight goes to decision, plus 150. The fight doesn't go to decision, is minus 190. Anything sticking out to you there in that aspect?
Well, that's a great point. Who brought that up in the chat, the over 1.5? Because we talked about this. These dudes are stupid tough. You're going to have to murder them to get them out of there. I mean, the only way that this fight gets stopped is if it's a submission or if the referee stops it, because Parisian's not going to quit and Roque Martinez is not going to quit. And neither one of these guys, I'd like to see Parisian get on top of him, but he hasn't even attempted a takedown in the UFC, so I don't know. I really don't know at this point if that's something that he's going to be able to do. So, Dimitri, good call on the over 1.5, because I think that could be a pretty good look here. Like I say, they're both really tough, and I don't see one of these guys really having a gigantic advantage over the other one in any particular place, because while I would say Parisian would have the better ground game here, I don't know if he can get it to the ground without knocking him down. So, the over 1.5. I like Parisian here, too, at minus 130. I might be willing to put a bet on him, but I'd have to see some regional footage where he's actually taking dudes down and finding a way to get on top of his opponent, because that's where Roque is going to be at his weakest. As long as Roque's got his feet underneath him and his hands up, he's going to be dangerous.
Yep. I like it 100%. So yeah, kind of looking forward to that fight. I guess it's kind of a shit show, but it should be fun. Two heavyweights going at it. I know Parisian's last fight. I did enjoy watching that. So next we have a very interesting fight here. We have Julian Rosa going against Seung-Woo Choi. Rosa, 31 years old, 6'1", 74-inch reach. We have Seung-Woo Choi, 28 years old, 6 foot, 74-inch reach as well. So both guys pretty tall for the division, and Rosa is going to be 1 inch taller. So taking a look at the last 5. So Julian Rosa did knock out Nate Landwehr. I believe it was like a flying knee that got him, knocked him out. That was Nate Landwehr's second knockout loss in the UFC. He had a win over Sean Woodson in a fight where he was getting his ass kicked all fight and then ended up submitting him in that third round. He got knocked out by Julio Arce. He lost to Grant Dawson, and he got knocked out by Devontae Smith. So I believe he was he cut from the UFC, and I think they did bring him back against Woodson there. And in that fight, Woodson was a huge favorite, and he was looking like a huge favorite up until that third round where Woodson did slow down. But as far as Seung-Woo Choi, he did beat Yusuf Zalal. He was a dog in that fight. I did bet him by decision at like plus 300, plus 330 in that last fight. He beat Mokhtarian by a decision in a fight where he probably should have knocked him out, and then lost by submission against Gavin Tucker. And I think this is really important here. His 2 losses in the UFC are against Gavin Tucker, who has shown to be a really good fighter, not in his last fight against Dan Ige, but still shown to be a very good fighter. And then lost to Movsar Evloev, a decision in a fight where he did get taken down, controlled, but again, Movsar Evloev. So I'm curious to really get into the stats on this one, Uncle Weezy. This is something I have taped. So what do you got here?
Man, this is going to be fight of the night. I'm really excited for this one. I mean, I don't know if Rosa's ever been in a boring fight. I mean, you look at those fights, Landwehr, Woodson, Arce, Dawson, Smith. I mean, he's fought some tough opponents. Look at those last 3 losses: Arce, Grant Dawson, and Devontae Smith. You want to talk about studs. And then you look at Choi, losing to Tucker, and then Evloev. Man, Evloev might have been the most impressive fighter on the card yesterday, rather than with the exception of Brandon Moreno really looking incredible winning that title. But these guys are great. I'm really excited for this fight. This fight's probably going to look a lot like the Woodson-Erosta fight, only Seung-Woo Choi has got a lot more power than Sean Woodson does. And I think what happened with that Woodson fight when Erosa beat Woodson was that he just realized Sean Woodson's a great boxer with great straight punches and great volume, but his punches don't hurt. So I'm going to walk through him, and I'm just going to eventually murder this guy. And that's what Erosa did. Seung-Woo Choi's punches are going to hurt. If he lands those kicks, if he lands those straight rights that he throws, one thing to note here is that Seung-Woo Choi is an orthodox fighter, and Erosa is a southpaw. So those right kicks for Choi and that right hand going to be open for business. The left kicks for Erosa, the left hand for Erosa, going to be open for business. These guys are going to be throwing bombs at each other. But if we get into the stats, pro experience, 337 minutes of cage time for Juliana Rosa, even though he's only 31 years old. So this dude's got a ton of experience, dude. 33 professional fights compared to 12 for Choi. We see that Choi's MMA career, 5 years, 9 months, as opposed to 10 years, 8 months for Erosa. So a huge experience advantage for Erosa here. Erosa 8 UFC fights to Sungwoo Choi's 4. They both have a 500 record. Sungwoo Choi's average fight time much longer at 14.57 minutes compared to 8.5 for Erosa. We see that Erosa is a finisher in his wins. 88% finish rate overall, 44% by sub, 44% by KO. And he's got 50% of his pro wins in the UFC have been come by KO and 25% by sub. We see that Sungwoo Choi is not a submission finisher. He finishes fights by KO at 56% clip, but he's never finished a fight in the UFC. He lost by sub in the UFC once out of his 2 losses. And he's been subbed in 33% of his pro losses, which is 1 time, and 33% of his pro losses he's been KO'd, so only 1 time there. If we look at the striking stats, I think this is definitely where the fight is going to take place. I think both of these guys are most comfortable striking. I think that's very clear. Erosa, 5.07 strikes landed per minute out of 10.75 offered for 47%, while Sungwoo Choi, 3.17 landed out of 7.72 for a 41% striking accuracy. The power numbers very similar at 0.58% for Erosa and 0.54% for Choi is how often they land a knockdown on their significant strikes. 0.44 knockdowns to 0.26 for Choi. So Erosa a little more accurate. Erosa is also a little bit more defensively sound, but he actually absorbs more strikes than he lands. He lands 5.07, he absorbs 5.72, but a 50% striking defense, while Choi only absorbs 2.45 strikes per minute out of 4.56. He gets hit less than he hits his opponents. He's got a 46% striking defense, and he's never been knocked down. So that's good. While Juliana Rosa has shown to be chinny in the UFC, a 1.29% knockdown per total significant strikes absorbed. So that's pretty high. It's pretty high for a featherweight. That's going to be interesting. He gets knocked down 1.1 times per 15 minutes, and we do know that Choi has that power. So that is one path to victory that I'm looking at for Choi, is to potentially land that big shot on Erosa because he is a bit chinny, and maybe he can finish the fight there. As in terms of the grappling stats, we kind of see that when these guys, when they do lose fights, it's because they're getting out-controlled by their opponents. We see that Erosa has a 54% takedown percentage. He's 6 of 11. So he attempts just over a takedown per fight. He gets 1.32 takedowns per 15 minutes. And he controls his opponents about 11.45% of the time, while Choi's 4 out of 7, 57%, gets about 1 takedown per 15 minutes and about 19% total control time. But if you look at the control time that these guys allow, they both get controlled about twice as much as they control their opponents. So Sungwoo Choi is getting controlled 39% of the time, and Erosa is getting controlled 22% of the time. So we could see that even though both of these guys are comfortable striking and most comfortable striking, that they might feel like that a path to victory could be that, maybe if the striking's not going as well as I would like it to go, I could try to take my opponent down. And that could be something we could see from Choi or Erosa. And both of these guys have gotten the takedowns when they've wanted them. I mean, 57%, 54%. They both get more than a takedown per 15 minutes. They both have the ability to control their opponents. So that could be a potential path to victory for either of them if they decide they want to commit to the wrestling, because both of these guys have been taken down a decent amount. Look at Choi, allowing 3.35 takedowns per 15 minutes. So that's, it's possible to take him down. He's got a 66% takedown defense, while Erosa gets taken down 2.21 times per 15 minutes for 58%. So if we look at the strength of schedule, both of these guys have fought some tough dudes. They both got ratios well over 1, with Sungwoo Choi's ratio being 3, Erosa's 1.8. Erosa's got a 2.5 ratio in his wins to 1.5 for Sungwoo Choi. And Sungwoo Choi's losses have come against guys like Tucker and Evloev, who have excellent records. So he's got a 6 ratio in his losses. So Sung Woo Choi's losses, tougher. He's got better. He's losing to slightly better competition, while Erosa's competition is a little more experienced. Both of these guys have, fought some tough dudes. So, to sum it up, Erosa's got an experience advantage. Erosa's a little more of a finisher, but I would say Choi's got the power advantage, and he's got that power advantage over a guy in Erosa who has shown that he can be knocked down. Both of these guys can be taken down and controlled. It just depends on which one of these guys is going to commit to the wrestling if they want to do that. It looks like it's going to be a close fight. I'm favoring Choi's power. I think he's a better striker than Erosa. A Korean Muay Thai champion, Choi was, prior to being a mixed martial artist. So he's got an extensive Muay Thai background, and he is a championship level Muay Thai practitioner. So I'm leaning Choi. I can't wait to see this fight. I think someone's going to get served. I think there's going to be violence. And I think both of these guys have fought some really good competition. So I'm interested to see which way you're leaning on this one.
Yeah, I'm leaning Choi as well. I taped this fight about a week ago looking to potentially take a shot on Choi. I guess the only thing that concerns me is, Erosa's going to be throwing more volume. But with that said, the dude eats punches with his face. And like you mentioned, that he's been dropped several times, he's been knocked out several times. So instead of betting Choi straight, which I feel like if it does go to decision, it could be a little bit iffy just with the volume of Erosa. I might be looking at the Choi knockout prop, and like you mentioned it, Erosa, he's a finisher as well, and Choi has been finished in 2 out of 3 losses. Maybe the under, where the fight doesn't go to decision, could be something to look at. The fight doesn't get the decision is plus 110. The under 2.5 is plus 140. As far as the money line goes, we have Choi opening up minus 145, currently minus 140, and Erosa opening up plus 115, currently plus 120. So, yeah, like I said, the picks, Choi. I'm not sure if I'm going to bet it yet. The volume does concern me. I feel like Erosa is going to be throwing more, maybe landing more in terms of the numbers. I favor Choi. I think he's the much better striker. It's just I feel like if it does go to decision, there could be some problems there. So I'm kind of looking at it as more of maybe like a Choi inside the distance, which is plus 310. Maybe like a Choi by knockout. If that's a good prop, I might take that, because Erosa, like you mentioned, the guy is very, very chinny. So do any of those props stick out to you?
Yeah, Erosa's been knocked down 4 times in 8 fights, and he's lost all those fights. Or wait, maybe he got knocked down in the Woodson fight and came back and won, but that's not important. The fact is he can be knocked down, and the guy like Choi's got that serious power. So, yeah, the Choi by knockout prop could be a potential thing to look for, simply because there's an avenue for it. We know Choi's got power, and we know that Erosa isn't the best defensive striker, and he could get knocked down for sure. So that's kind of like what I'm looking at. I would definitely need to tape this a little bit more, but I love those southpaw versus orthodox matchups when those guys get to use their power hands more. It opens up those big body kicks, the big head kicks with the strong leg for both of them, and I could see this one ending inside the distance. And you might get a really good line on it, because the average fight time for Sung Woo Choi so far has been 14.57 minutes, and the reason for that is because his opponents have been controlling him on the ground. I don't think Erosa is going to get rack up a ton of control time. He's only got 11.45% control time in his UFC career. So I think we'll see these guys on the feet way more than we'll see them on the ground. And I think somebody could get served here.
Oh, yeah. I think it definitely has potential to be possibly fight of the night. I think they're both going to stand in the middle and trade. So it should be fun there. So we'll get into the next fight here. And we have one that I know Uncle Weezy's looking forward to. I know Uncle Weezy's a big fan of Verna Jandaroba, and she is taking on Kanako Murata, who we saw make her UFC debut, I believe, last fight against Randa Marcos, and she looked very, very dominant in that fight. But Murata, she is young. She is 27 years old. She is 5'1", 62-inch reach. As far as Verna, she is 33 years old, going to be 6 years older, 5'3", 2-inch height advantage, and 64-inch reach, which is a 2-inch reach advantage. Taking a look at their last couple of fights, we have Murata, like I mentioned, she beat Randa Marcos. I believe that was her UFC debut. And then as far as Jandiroba, she did lose to Mackenzie Dern, which was a kind of a close fight. She beat Felice Herrick by sub. Watched that earlier today. It was a nice armbar. Beat Mallory Martin by submission and lost to Carla Esparza, which was a close decision. But yeah, I mean, very, very interesting fight. we have kind of a clash of styles. We have Murata, who is, going to be going out there and getting takedowns. Her takedowns are very good, very strong. And then we have Verna Jandaroba, who is a legit black belt, a legit grappler. Both these fighters typically don't look to strike in their fights. They look to get this fight down to the mat. And I do think that's where it plays out. So, Uncle Weezy, let's hear some stats on this one. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I'm excited for this one too, man. If you're like me and you like handsome women, this should be at the top of your card in terms of fights that you're going to watch here, because you got a couple of really handsome women here. I'm a big fan of both of them. Murata's really interesting here. 6 years younger than Verna Jandaroba, 27 for Murata, 33 for Jandiroba. That's a great thing. And when you look at Murata's background, she's got a background in judo, and she's also got a background in high-level freestyle wrestling. When you put those two skill sets together, you've got somebody that's going to have just a cornucopia of ways to take you down. Judo players use throws, they use sweeps, they use reaps, they use trips. They use a lot of what will be considered to be Greco-Roman type takedown. And judo players, when you just practice judo, when you compete in judo, you're not allowed to use wrestling techniques. You're not allowed to attack a leg. For instance, if you're a judo player and you want to take your opponent down in the judo match, you can't shoot for a single leg. It's not even legal. So usually a lot of judo players, they don't have a way to get to the fight to the ground if they can't use their sweeps, trips, and reaps. Kanako Murata doesn't have that problem because she can use her freestyle wrestling, single legs, double legs, in order to get the fight to the ground if she doesn't want to do it using clinch work, which is a lot of the ways that judo fighters get the fight to the ground. So Kanako Murata's got a nice hybrid of a skill set in order to be able to control her opponents. Verna Jandaroba, however, is such a high-level black belt that, this is not a good matchup for Kanako, because she's going to be fighting somebody. Her path to victory is taking somebody down, using ground and pound, wearing on them, racking up control time. But Verna Jandaroba is a world champion jiu-jitsu player who can get submissions off her back and from the top. She has a triangle finish. She has 3 finishes by armbar. So she can not only get, submissions from the top, but also from the bottom. So this is what I would call a really intriguing matchup. I feel like this is going to be one of those fights that people are really separated on, and they're going to choose a side. They're going to choose Murata's wrestling and judo, or they're going to choose the ground game and submission game of Virna. So let's get into the stats. Kanako Murata, not much of a finisher. 33% by sub, 17% by KO for a 50% overall finish rate, while Jandiroba has finished 81% of her pro wins by sub. Kanako Murata's only loss was by submission. That's eye-opening, because that's a path to victory. If her only loss came by submission, and now you're fighting Verna Jandaroba, you're kidding yourself if you think that Jandiroba doesn't have a path to victory by submission. I mean, come on. If we look at striking, this is terrible. These women are not good strikers. That's not where their skill set is. So Murata, 67% striking accuracy. That's because it was all ground strikes. And then Verna Jandaroba, very, very basic striking, very low level. And then the striking defense, let's just skip over striking. If this winds up being a striking match, it'll probably be the worst fight of the year. But Murata, 4 of 9 on takedowns against Randa Marcos. She averages 4 per 15 minutes, averages 2 sub attempts, a 62% control time while yielding 0. So obviously Murata's debut in the UFC was dominant. Virna, 8 of 15 on her takedown attempts for 53%. That's excellent. 3.16 takedowns per 15 minutes, 1.97 subs per 15 minutes, a 31% control time while yielding 22% control time. But, the fact that she fought Carla Esparza, shows us why she's been controlled that much of the time. So Virna's been taken down 1.58 times per 15 minutes. She's shown 73% takedown defense thus far. So this is going to be really interesting. Virna has fought, without a doubt, the better level of competition. She's got 4 UFC fights, while Murata only has 1. Murata only fought Randa Marcos, who's 6-10 in the UFC. While Verna Jandaroba is fighting killers like Carla Esparza and Mackenzie Dern. Her wins are over Felice Herrig and Mallory Martin. So probably Herrig and Martin a notch below where Murata is with her skill set. She's an interesting puzzle to solve, is Kanako Murata. But, Murata younger. Murata's got a really interesting combination of a skill set here. We see that, Murata's wrestling is really good, but Virna's subs are really good. I would have to give the strength of schedule advantage to Virna. I would have to give the experience advantage probably to Virna with 5 more fights and a slightly better record. And I would have to give the grappling advantage in terms of submissions to Virna, but you've got to favor Murata's ability to get the fight to the ground and to potentially keep it there. But she's going to, when she does get the fight to the ground, she's going to be fighting off submissions the whole fucking time. She's going to be fighting off sweeps the whole time. If you look at how well Verna Jandaroba grappled with Carla Esparza, it'll make you feel pretty good about the fact that she should be able to handle Kanako as well. The line is -150 for Virna right now. And as much of a fan as I am of hers, as handsome as she is, might be a little bit wide. I was talking like I was going to put a big bet on Virna, but after watching Kanako, I'm stepping back on that a little bit. I don't think this line's going to move a lot right now, so I'm going to wait on it. But this is a very interesting fight, man. It's a clash of styles, and I think going forward after this fight, we're going to have a lot of information about Virna and Kanako that will help us be able to make better decisions about them down the road, because this is going to be a fight that's going to answer a lot of questions about both of their skill sets and both of their futures in the UFC.
100%. Yeah, like this is there you go. Okay. 100%. Like this is a matchup where it's you got a really, really good wrestler, and then you got a really, really good grappler. I guess what stuck out to me, and I did tape this one, and ultimately I will be going with Verna Jandaroba, is I forget which fight it was. I think it was against Emily in her last fight prior to the UFC. I'm not sure, 100% sure if it was that fight, but man, Murata was putting herself in a ton of bad spots. And that Emily, don't pronounce her last name, Duco, something like that. But yeah, she is, I think she just got her brown belt. Regardless, Verna Jandaroba is a much better grappler. And I was kind of thinking like, man, if Verna gets her in these same positions, she's going to finish the fight. Like she put herself in some terrible positions. It was like round after round after round after round. I think it was like 7 or 8 times where it looked like, hey, this fight could potentially be over. So I did not like that. But yeah, Murata, she's very young. She's going to be making improvements. She's very good. It's just she's going to get this fight down to the mat, and that's kind of where Jandiroba is comfortable. So it makes the fight really, really intriguing. As far as the line goes, Uncle Weezy did mention it. Jandiroba is -150. She opened up -165. Murata is +130, opened up +135. The fight goes to decision is -160. Fight doesn't go to decision is +120. I think a very interesting prop, and it looks like the bookmakers are all over it, would be Jandiroba inside the distance, Jandiroba by submission. We talked about it that Jandiroba, when she wins, it's by submission. I don't think she has any knockout wins. If she does, it's one. I think it's all by submission, and we have seen that Murata has been submitted in her only loss. And like I said, Murata puts herself in a ton of bad spots. So I think if you're going to play this one, instead of laying the -150 on Verna, I really don't see Jandiroba winning a decision if she's going to be on her back. I really don't see Jandiroba getting a knockout if she's going to be on her back. I think for Jandiroba to win, it's going to have to be probably a submission on her back. I mean, this screams armbar from guard all day. I will be picking Jandiroba. I don't love the money line, but once that Jandiroba by submission prop comes out, if it's a decent price, I'm probably going to take a shot on that. What do you think, Uncle Weezy?
Yeah, she's so good, dude. Virna is very, very, very high level, and like you say, again in that Ducote fight, Murata did put herself in a bunch of different bad situations, and you can't do that against the grappling difference between Ducote and Jandiroba are it's a big gap there. But there's a lot to like about both of these fighters. This is going to be a damn good fight. I'm really fired up for this one, actually.
Dude, I can't wait. fun fight. All right, so we'll get into the next fight here. I believe this is the first fight on the main card. We have Matt Brown going against Dhiego Lima, a fight that everybody's looking forward to. Just kidding. I mean, I don't know. Matt Brown, he's 40 years old, 6 foot, 75-inch reach, going against Dhiego Lima, who is 32 years old, 6'2", 75-inch reach. So kind of the last 5 fights here. Matt Brown lost to Carlos Condit. Matt Brown got knocked out by Miguel Baeza. Remember that fight that he did actually hurt Miguel Baeza in that first round, I believe. He knocked out Ben Saunders. He knocked out Diego Sanchez, and he lost to Donald Cerrone by knockout. As far as Dhiego Lima, he had that decision loss to Bilal Muhammad in a fight that Muhammad looked very, very good. He beat Luke Jamu. He beat Court McGee. He beat Chad Laprise, and he lost to Yushin Okami. So, interesting fight. This is one that I have not taped yet. I'll be getting into the tape more of it tomorrow, but I'm definitely curious to hear some of the stats on this one and see how it plays out.
Yeah, man, these are a couple of veterans here. You know, Matt Brown, 40 pro fights. Dhiego Lima, 23 pro fights. You know, kind of like a journeyman record on both of them with 15-8 for Lima, 22-18 for Brown. Brown, 323 minutes in the cage. And that's in 40 fights, so only an 8-minute, average fight time. Dude's obviously a finisher, and he's obviously capable of being finished as well. 15-year career for Matt Brown at 40 years old. You know, there's a lot of tread on those tires. And Dhiego Lima, 11-year career at the age of 32. So, he's been fighting for a long time as well. And, and we see that Lima's got 10 UFC fights while Matt Brown has 27. Matt Brown 15-12 in the UFC. We got 4-6 for Lima. Matt Brown spent about 3 times as much time in the UFC cage as Lima has. The average fight time very much the same. What's interesting here are the finish stats. We see overall a 91% finish rate. In 22 fights for Matt Brown. That's crazy, dude. He's finished 20 out of his 22 wins. That's incredible, especially at the level of competition that this guy's been fighting for such a long time. But he's 40 years old now. He's 40 years old. The last win that he's got, the last 2 wins, Ben Saunders and Diego Sanchez. Those are not impressive wins at this point. Now the guy's 40. And, we look at what Dhiego Lima did in his last fight against the not washed up Bilal Muhammad, a very high level welterweight. That was a close fight, man. He had Bilal in trouble on his legs, man. Those leg kicks were working. So, just at first glance, when I saw this, I was thinking to myself, man, this is screaming inside the distance. Matt Brown's fights finish inside the distance. Lima, he commits to the calf kick so well that you could see him finishing, even though he's not really like what you would call a knockdown artist. You don't have to be a knockdown artist when you land 20 calf kicks. That can be enough, So we see that Matt Brown, 3.62 out of 6.61 for a 54% striking accuracy, while Dhiego Lima, 3.14 landed out of 8.11, 38% striking accuracy. So obviously Matt Brown, probably the more experienced striker, the more accurate striker, and the more powerful striker at 0.98 knockdown per significant strikes landed percent and 0.73 for Lima. Defensively, Lima's pretty good, even though he absorbs more than he lands. A 59% striking defense is good. 55 for Brown. Brown, even though he's lost 12 UFC fights, he still lands way more than he absorbs at 3.62 to 2.62. While Lima's getting outlanded, 3.14 he lands, and his opponents land 3.93. One thing that we see here that leads us to believe that this wouldn't be a bad inside the distance bet is that both of these guys get knocked down on more than 1% of the significant strikes landed against them. 1.2% for Brown, 1.46% for Lima. That's what I would call in the chinny category for a welterweight. 0.47 knockdowns per 15 minutes against for Brown, 0.86 for Lima. So Matt Brown, 27 fights in the UFC. He has gotten 26 takedowns for a 44% takedown percentage. He gets 1.53 per 15 minutes. He attempts 1.42 subs, and he controls his opponents 21.34% of the time. while Lima has been 8 of 19 on his takedown attempts in his 10 UFC fights. So he only attempts about 2 takedowns per 15 minutes or per fight. At 42% takedown accuracy, he's getting 1.38 per 15 minutes, 0.69 subs, and a 15.5% control time. Both of these guys are getting controlled by their opponents more than they control their opponents. Matt Brown, 21% control time, 35% against. And Dhiego Lima, 15.5% control time, 25.5 against. So both of these guys have shown a propensity to be able to be controlled by their opponents. However, Dhiego Lima and Matt Brown haven't shown too much of an offensive wrestling game. So I don't know how much either one of these guys is going to commit to the wrestling in this fight. I kind of see this being a little bit more of a striking competition. If we look at the strength of schedule, we see some numbers that are very similar. Matt Brown, 1.39 ratio, Dhiego Lima, 1.4. Brown fighting the more experienced competition. The wins, 1.41 ratio for Brown, 1.23 for Lima. Once again, Brown fighting the more experienced competition at 11 average fights as opposed to 7.25. And the losses are both to pretty good competition as well, 1.38 and 1.48 ratios, respectively. Both of their losses are coming to opponents that have more than 10 UFC fights, 12 for Lima, 17 for Brown. So, maybe Brown a little bit of a strength of schedule advantage, Brown a little bit of a power advantage, a little bit of a striking advantage, but he's old. He's 40 years old. Dhiego Lima is 8 years younger than him. The wins for Brown are not going to knock your socks off in the last 5 with Saunders and Sanchez. Well, you see wins like Chad Laprise, Court McGee, Luke Jumo, and the losses come to a 185er in Yushin Okami, and then Bilal Muhammad. So, I think maybe I'm leaning Lima here, but I don't know if I bet it. I think a good path to victory for either of these guys would be committing to the wrestling, but I'm not entirely sure which one of these guys is more likely to do that. You talk about just over 2 takedown attempts for Brown per fight, and the same thing with just under 2 for Lima. So, yeah, man, I'm leaning Lima just because Matt Brown's 40. That's the most important statistic here. I mean, you look at that, all these statistics on this fucking page, and all you really need to look at is 40 years of age for Matt Brown. It's old for a welterweight, man. He's absorbed. My God, he's absorbed 666 strikes in the UFC cage.
Crazy.
That's a lot, man. That's a lot, So a lot of tread on the tires. I wouldn't feel safe betting on Matt Brown here. What do we got for a line, though? What are we looking at?
Yeah, so we'll take a look at the line here, and we do have Lima as a slight favorite. He did open up minus 163 on some books. He's minus 175 on other books. You mentioned that, this fight has a decent potential and inside the distance. They actually opened up the over-under at 2.5 rounds. The under is plus 145, which is very, very interesting. We'll have to look more into that. Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, this is kind of how I made my my Bilal Muhammad, Damian Maia prediction. Just look at the age. I mean, 40 years old. I'll probably go Lima. I have to tape this one still, but man, I'm curious about that under 2.5 at plus money there. It's only open on one book right now, but it looks like it opened at plus 160. Some money's already coming in on that, so I'll take a closer look at that. As far as like an early lean, it's going to be Lima, just based off the age of Brown, but I still have to tape this one. But yeah, it should be a fun fight, and more than likely does end inside the distance, I'd say. So we'll get to the next fight here. We have a very interesting fight. We have Wellington Turman going against the other Bruno Silva. We have Wellington Turman, who is 24 years old, 6 foot, 72-inch reach. And then we have Bruno Silva, who is 6 foot, don't know his reach. We'll take a look at the last couple opponents here. Wellington Turman lost to Andrew Sanchez by knockout. I remember betting Andrew Sanchez as a dog in that fight. Wasn't expecting Sanchez to knock him out, but he did. He beat Marcus Perez, lost to Carl Roberson. And then as far as Silva, he is making his UFC debut. So this is going to be very interesting because we do not have much stats on Silva. I did tape this one a little bit because I did want to see, what Bruno Silva was all about. And, the guy has not fought in a while, it looks like. I think he did pop for some PEDs. I think he was supposed to make his UFC debut, but it said he failed a drug test, so that's interesting. So we have not seen him in a couple of years. I checked out his Instagram, and it looks like the dude is, absolutely jacked. And I did watch some of his fights. The guy's a finisher. The guy is a knockout artist. I'm sure you'll get into some of the knockout numbers, but he's exciting. I can't wait to see him. And this is a very good fight because it looks like, and I know you'll talk about it, it looks like Silva has been submitted a handful of times going against Turman, who is a legit black belt. This on paper, it seems like a really fun matchup here.
I agree. The thing is, there's just not a lot of information on Silva. I mean, obviously he has no UFC fights. I'm looking at his Tapology profile right now. 2 fights ago, this dude knocked out Alexander Shlemenko, 57-10. That's a good win. And then he also beat Kovalev. His last 4 wins, knockouts, 3 of them in the first round, 1 of them in the 4th. So he won, his win over Artem Frolov, who was 11-0 going into that fight, was a 4th round KO at 3:36 in the 4th round. So I didn't see that fight, but man, it's good to know that this guy can go into the 4th round and still carry that power with him. As far as Turman, we know that he's a submission artist, dude. So I think he's a black belt. This is going to be very interesting. If we look at the finish stats, Wellington Turman has got a 69% win rate by finish, 44% by sub, 25% by KO. And then we look at Bruno Silva, 6 professional losses, 5 of them by submission. So when we want to talk about a big fat path to victory, we're looking at one with Wellington Turman here by submission.
Yeah.
However, I'd love to tell you how many times Bruno Silva's been taken down, but I can't. I'd love to tell you how many significant strikes he lands per minute, but I can't. All I know is that Wellington Turman subs dudes, Bruno Silva gets subbed. We got Bruno Silva 7 years older, like you say, and his last fight was 2018, November 2nd, 2018. So, yeah, I would be interested in seeing what the Wellington Turman sub prop is, but I'll have to watch some tape on this guy for sure. But I don't know what his ground game is like, but I could tell that if you've had 6 losses and 5 of them came by sub, you probably don't have an elite ground game. So this is going to be interesting. Turman has fought Andrew Sanchez, Marcus Perez, Roberson, and Marcio Alexandre Jr. So, and we know that a win over Shlemenko is a good win for Silva, but I just don't have enough information to give you anything more. But we do see Wellington Turman 3 fights, and he's attempted 17 takedowns. So for a guy who subs guys, and for a guy like Silva who gets subbed, it's good to know that Wellington Turman is attempting 6 takedowns per fight. That's a great statistic, right? I mean, that's really helpful because we don't know much about Silva, but if we do know that he's been sub 5 out of 6 losses, we want to know if the guy that he's fighting will commit to the takedown to try to get the fight to the ground to open up that path to victory. So, I'm leaning Turman here, but I need more information about Bruno Silva.
Shout out to Joe for hanging out. Interesting fight. Like I said, I taped Silva. Believe it or not, although he's been submitted a million times, the dude's, I think, is a brown belt, which is, crazy to think about. I was shocked when I saw that because on tape, it does not look like a brown belt at all. I mean, this guy gets taken down. He really has nothing to offer. So I don't know who's giving out brown belts for free, but, somebody is. So like you mentioned it, interesting fight. Wellington Turman, he needs to get this fight down to the mat. And I don't know, I feel like he could. I mean, he has solid wrestling and his grappling is like next level. He's a legit black belt, but on the feet, that's where it gets very, very scary. I think that Silva's going to have a massive advantage on the feet. He's very powerful. He's a finisher. He's dangerous. So kind of another fight where you have a clash of styles where Turman's going to want to get this down to the mat and Silva's going to want to keep this on the feet and try to knock him out. So we'll take a look at the odds here. And we have, if I can find it,
Need it.
There it is. All right. So Bruno Silva opened up -160, and he's currently -145. And then Wellington Turman opened up plus 130. He's currently plus 125. So that kind of shocks me, seeing Turman as an underdog, because Silva, for one, he's taken a huge layoff, about 3 years, coming off of a possible PED suspension. The dude's been submitted a handful of times, going against a legit black belt in Turman. That kind of shocks me right there. As far as the unders and all that go, they open it up at 2.5 rounds, which I do think there's a very good chance that there's a finish in this fight. The under is minus 135, under 2.5 minus 135. The fight doesn't go to decision is minus 170. Any of those props sticking out to you?
Let's see. Somebody brought up a good point in there. I don't know if it was Dan who said that he might bet Turman by sub and Silva by KO. Yeah, and that's not a bad, because you would be getting probably plus 200 at least on both of them, and it seems like that's the most. Those are the obvious paths to victory for both of these guys. So that'd be a good way to hedge that. But it does seem like that's a little wide. Why is Wellington Turman plus money? With that path, they both have paths to victory. I mean, evidently Silva's a very dangerous striker, but Wellington Turman's averaging 6 takedowns per fight. So I don't know how long Silva's going to be able to get. I'm kind of looking at the plus money. The inside the distance prop could be interesting. Yeah. Like like one of the guys in the chat said, if you want to bet Silva by KO and Turman by sub, you'll get plus 200, and probably that'd be a nice hedge. There's a lot of different ways it looks like you could approach this fight. I'd just like to get a little more information on Bruno Silva before I did that,
Yeah, I feel it. But yeah, it looks like a lot of early money's coming in on Bruno Silva. I don't know if they think it's the other Bruno Silva or something, but yeah, very interesting. Maybe somebody knows something we don't, because I did check his Instagram, and he's like in phenomenal shape. So that could be why. But it kind of seems like a pick'em fight to me. This is one I taped. I don't know who I'm gonna pick yet. Might pick Turman. I don't know, but it seems like a 50-50 fight. I mean, if Turman's able to get this fight down to the mat, he probably gets a sub. If he does not, he probably gets knocked out. I think the best way to look is probably that under 2.5 at minus 135. That's something I'm going to be looking at for sure. So, yeah, very fun fight, and I think it does deliver. So, speaking of very fun fight, we have Marlon Vera going against Davey Grant. So, we have Marlon Vera, 28 years old, 5'8", 70-inch reach, and the age surprises me. It seems like Marlon Vera should be so much older, but he's only 28 years old. He's been fighting for a while, it seems. We have Davey Grant, 35 years old, 5'8", 69-inch reach. The age does concern me a little bit, but man, has he been looking good. We'll take a look at the last 5 fights. Marlon Vera had that loss to Jose Aldo. He did knock out Sean O'Malley. He lost to Song Yadong in a close fight. He beat Andre Yul by knockout, and then he subbed Nolene Hernandez. As far as Davey Grant, he's been on a little bit of a run here. He knocked out Jonathan Martinez as a really big dog. He knocked out Martin Day as a dog. He beat Gregory Popov by decision. A loss by submission to Manny Bermudez. Loss by submission to Damian Stasiak. And a very interesting fight we have here. So if you guys have not known yet, but Davey Grant actually beat Marlon Vera. I believe it was Marlon Vera's 3rd fight in the UFC. And I went back and watched that fight. I think it was like 30-26s on all 3 judges' scorecards. So kind of the rematch here. And you can see that early money is coming in on the Davey Grant side. But I don't know. It's a very, very intriguing matchup. I'm curious to hear your stats on it. So Uncle Weezy, what do you have here?
Yeah, so that first fight took place on February 27th, 2016, so we're talking about over 5 years now have passed since that fight. If we look at the stats from that fight, we see that Marlon Vera Davey Grant landed 72 strikes. He got 1 takedown out of 5 attempts, and 23 significant strikes only landed for Vera, and he was 1 of 6 on his takedown attempts. So yeah, this is a rematch, and Davey Grant dominated the first one. But there's some great numbers here. These guys are when I looked at Marlon Vera's numbers, I kind of just, there are some things hidden in the Marlon Vera numbers that are really interesting. It'll make you like this guy. For instance, the first thing I looked at was I didn't realize. So you talk about 10 wins in the UFC, and Marlon Vera's finished 9 of them. 90% finish rate in 10 wins in the UFC. And he has 6 losses in the UFC, and he's never been finished in those 6 losses. So it's impressive with the level of competition that Marlon Vera has been fighting, that he's literally finishing 90% of his opponents, and none of his opponents are finishing him. And the guys that are beating him are former champions, hype trains, really good fighters. So there's a lot of stats that really kind of stick out in this one. We got Vera being the more experienced fighter overall with 24 pro fights as opposed to 17 for Grant. Grant has been injured a few times in his career. He hasn't been very active. 11 years, almost 12 years in the game and only 17 fights. While we see that Marlon Vera has been in the game for almost 11 years and he's got 24 fights. So Marlon Vera 16 UFC fights, Davey Grant 7. Average fight time a little over 10 minutes for both of them. Marlon Vera about 100 more minutes of UFC cage time here. We went over the Vera finish stats, 88% overall, 90% in the UFC, never been finished. Davey Grant overall has a 85% finish rate, 62% by sub, 23% by KO. And in the UFC, in his 4 wins, he's finished 2 of them by KO. However, in his 3 UFC losses, he's been subbed in every single one of them.
Yep. So
already some very compelling statistics, as Marlon Vera has finished 4 of his 10 wins by sub, and Davey Grant's 3 losses in the UFC have all come by sub. Big fat path to victory for Marlon Vera by submission here. If we look at the striking numbers, very similar, very, very similar here. 3.64 landed, 3.93 for Grant. 49% accuracy for Vera, 47 for Grant. 0.79% takedown or knockdown ratio, 0.71 for Grant. Knockdowns per 15 minutes, almost identical. Where we see the difference is in the ratios, right? So we got a 52% striking defense and a 63% striking defense for Grant. So much better defensively is Grant. Also, we have to notice that Davey Grant, while landing 3.93 significant strikes per minute, is only absorbing 2.47. That's an excellent ratio. While Marlon Vera is, in fact, absorbing more strikes than he's landing. He lands 3.64, absorbs 3.95. So it's clear that Grant is the better defensive fighter here. But Davey Grant is chinny. 1.69% of the significant strikes landed against him have put him on his ass at a 0.63 knockdowns per 15 minutes. So that's another potential path to victory there, as Marlon Vera has shown some power on the feet and Davey Grant has shown the ability to be knocked down. Davey Grant has power, but Marlon Vera's never been knocked down. And I mean, we're talking about 16 UFC fucking fights. He's never been knocked down. He's never been finished. This dude's a G. He's very, very, very tough. When we look at control time and grappling here, we see that Marlon Vera, 9 of 24 on his takedowns for 37%. So he's only attempting 1.5 takedowns per fight, and he's only getting about 0.78 per 15 minutes. He averages over a sub attempt per 15 minutes, though he is actively searching for submissions when he's on the ground. But he's getting controlled by his opponents 2-1, as he controls his opponents 13% of the time and gets controlled 26% of the time. However, we see Davey Grant is controlling his opponents 26% of the time, only being controlled 17.67. So we see that Grant is more effective in controlling his opponents when they're on the ground, while Vera is getting controlled a little bit more when he's on the ground. If we go to the strength of schedule here, we'll see that, oh, by the way, both got pretty good takedown defense, 67% for Grant, 70% for Vera. Vera, 1.35 ratio to 1 for overall strength of schedule, and he's fighting the more experienced competition too. So the strength of schedule looks better for Vera. He's fought more fights, he's fought tougher fights, and he's fought more experienced competition on the aggregate. And he's definitely losing to better competition than Davey Grant is. Davey Grant's losing to guys like Bermudez and Stasiak, while, Song Yadong and Jose Aldo are some of the guys that are beating, Marlon Vera. So we know that the second fight doesn't usually go exactly like the first fight. I mean, look at Figueiredo Moreno last night. And And we can name a lot more examples too. It's, you know, for every fight that kind of takes place exactly the same way as it did the first time, which is almost like, you know, the Adesanya-Vettori fight was kind of similar to how it went down the last time. That fight did take place very much the same way. So I don't see this one taking place the same way. It was 6 years ago. Marlon Vera has been a lot more active than Davey Grant has been. They know each other. They know each other's strengths and weaknesses. I'm definitely leaning Vera here. He's been busier. I think he's dangerous in more ways than Grant is. And I love Marlon Vera's toughness. I think there's a huge advantage there with the fact that this dude's never been finished. He's never been knocked down. While when we see that Grant starts to see some adversity, he's immediately getting subbed. Every time he loses a fight, he's getting finished. So, you know, I like Vera over the 15 minutes to find that way to make Grant uncomfortable. And when he gets uncomfortable, I think Grant might start looking for that door. And Marlon Vera is going to fucking help him find it.
Man, what a fight. What a fight.
Right?
It's the rematch that, you know, everybody is asking for. And I don't know, it's a fun fight. We'll take a look at the line here. And we have Vera, I believe he is the biggest favorite on the card, opening up minus 285, currently minus 240, and Davey Grant opening up plus 225, currently plus 200. I feel like this line is going to close a lot more as the week goes on. People are going to look back 6 years ago and say, hey, Davey Grant dominated Marlon Vera, 30-26 across the board. Man, let's take a shot on Davey Grant at plus money. It's just, you know, Davey Grant, he is 35 years old. That's getting up there for bantamweight. It really is. And you have Marlon Vera, who I like what he brings to the table. I think his toughness is probably the biggest aspect. The guy has some chin on him. He's never been knocked out, and I don't see that changing here. Davey Grant, what's interesting about him is yeah, he's been dropped quite a bit in the UFC. He brought up his knockdown stats against him, but he's been submitted in all of his losses, which is very, very, very interesting. Marlon Vera, you know, decent submissions himself. So for me, I'm just going to keep waiting all week. I want this line to close up. I feel like it's going to close up. I feel like, you know, Grant can definitely be, you know, one of the public dogs that seems like everybody's on. I think that line's going to close up quite a bit. But yeah, I do lean towards the Vera side. You know, like I said, the fight was 6 years ago. I do think Marlon Vera has made, you know, massive improvements. But with that said, Davey Grant's been on a tear. He's been on a tear. So I'm curious to see, you know, this fight play out. Fight doesn't get decision minus 125. I really don't want to mess around with that because, you know, if Vera wins, it's probably a good chance it's by submission, maybe a knockout. If Davey Grant wins, it's probably by decision. Like, I don't see Grant submitting Vera. I definitely don't see him knocking out Vera. So if you like the Davey Grant, you know, adding on to the plus 200, I think Grant by decision, which is plus 450, which is very, very interesting because, like I said, Vera, he's not getting finished, especially by Grant here. So I will take Vera. I'll take him as far as a pick goes. I'm not betting it at this line, but if we do see Vera towards the end of the week, minus 200, minus 190, at that point, I will jump on. But I'm really curious to see where the line moves. But as far as the week starting out already on a Sunday, it looks like some early loves coming in for Davey Grant.
And this is going to be a hell of a fight, dude. And, you know, I see where I see Grant having the biggest advantage is he's very defensively sound. It's just that when he does get hit, you know, he's only absorbed 177 strikes in the UFC, but he's been knocked down 3 times. But he's still only getting hit 2.47 times per minute. So he is defensively sound. It's just that you would think that eventually Marlon's going to find that chin or he's going to get him on his ass and he's going to, you know, start going for submissions. So, yeah, this is going to be a good fight, man. I'm going to be tuning in for this one, whether or not I have money on it.
It's going to be good. It's going to be good. But we'll get to the next fight, which is, really interesting fight. This is a fight that I actually taped a couple weeks ago. I was thinking about potentially laying that chalk on Sergey Spivak. I think it's sitting around like minus 230. Was thinking about making it a pretty big play. After taping it, I decided to kind of stay away, and I'll kind of talk about why after you get into the stats. But we have Oleinik, who is, my goodness, 43 years old. He's 43 years old. His birthday is actually June 20th, 6 days before mine. So he's about to be 44. He's about to be 44 in a couple of days here. He's 6'2", 80-inch reach, going against Sergey Spivak, 26 years old. He's going to be younger by a significant margin. He's 6'3", 78-inch reach. So Oleinik's going to have a 2-inch reach advantage, and Oleinik's going to have a 1-inch height disadvantage. So we'll take a look at the last 5. We have a knockout loss to Chris Daukaus, a knockout loss to Derek Lewis in Oleinik. He also got knocked out by Walt Harris. He did beat Werdum by split decision in a very, very weird fight, and he did submit Maurice Green. As far as Sergey Spivak, had a very good performance over Jared Vanderaa in his last fight, getting that knockout win. I believe it was in the second or third round. He beat Carlos Felipe in a fight where he looked pretty solid. He lost to Marcin Tybura. He submitted Tai Tuivasa, and he got knocked out by Walt Harris. So this is very, very interesting to me, and I can't wait to hear the numbers for it because, man, Oleinik, when he's losing, Oleinik's getting knocked out, and I just don't know if Sergey Spivak is a guy that has the power of a Chris Daukaus, of a Derek Lewis, as a Walt Harris, as an Overeem. So, Uncle Weezy, do you think Sergey Spivak can come out here and knock out Oleinik in the first round, or do you think he does not have the power to do that? Do you think this gets extended?
Well, I think Spivak can do it. Look, 75 professional fights for Aleksei Oleinik, right? And so that's what we call a pretty big sample size in the statistics business, right? And then in that huge sample size of 59 wins, 15 losses, and a draw, this guy's average fight time is only 5 minutes.
Crazy.
Isn't that unbelievable? Dude, 75 fights. You'd think at some point you'd fight a 25-minute fight that would go to decision, and it would just throw off that average, and it would get up to a decent number. But that's in all of his professional fights. And even in the UFC, where he's got 14 fights, an average fight time of 5.86 minutes. So I'll go through the numbers and I'll talk about some of the things that are catching my eye with this one. 43 years old for Oleinik and 26 for Sergey Spivak, so, this guy's 17 years younger. If we look at how Spivak's lost fights, he lost to Marcin Tybura, and Tybura used his wrestling and top game in order to dominate him. The thing about Oleinik is Oleinik doesn't have wrestling. He's got elite jiu-jitsu. He's got an amazing submission game. But his ability to be able to actually take the fight to the ground is not really there anymore. Yep. It's not. We saw that Spivak got knocked out by Walt Harris, but that could happen to anyone. We talked about Walt Harris a couple weeks ago. According to my power ranking, he is the third most powerful heavyweight in the UFC. So you get knocked out by Walt Harris, that's something that can happen to anybody. His last two fights could have been stopped. He could have stopped that Overeem fight could have been stopped. And man, he was kicking the shit out of Tybura. That was there were a couple places where I thought that would get stopped. But Spivak obviously a lot less experience, but he's a lot younger. He's got a lot less tread on the tires. If we look at Aleksei Oleinik in his 59 professional wins, 78 have become 78% by sub, 14% by KO. So even in 59 wins, this guy is finishing at an over 90% rate. So he's kill or be killed. When he does lose, he's getting knocked out 60% of the time and subbed even 13% of the time. So it's the definition of a kill or be killed fighter. If you don't like if you think the line's too wide on Spivak and you don't feel like taking the underdog shot on Oleinik, a nice parlay piece will probably be the fight doesn't go to decision, even though you might have to pay up to like minus 350 or something like that. You could try the over-under. But if we look at the statistics here on striking, 3.47 out of 6.88 for Oleinik, 50%. He's got a 0.7% knockdown rate. Spivak, very similar at about 49.86% accuracy. He's never knocked anyone down in the UFC, that is. Aleksei's absorbing more than he lands, and Sergey Spivak is landing 3.58 and only absorbing 2.84. Aleksei Oleinik's striking defense is 44%, while Spivak's is 58%. We see that the knockdowns against Aleksei Oleinik is getting knocked down on 1.58% of the significant strikes landed against him, which means that he's been knocked down probably 5 times out of 316 strikes. So that's a lot. While Spivak has been knocked down 1 time out of 138 strikes he absorbed. That was Walt Harris that did it to him. So Oleinik definitely way more chinny than Spivak. And you hesitate to call somebody like Spivak chinny because, Walt Harris can literally knock anyone down. Yeah. If we look at the grappling statistics, both pretty impressive here. 14 fights, 28 takedown attempts. Oleinik's gotten 13 of them. So he averages 2.38 takedowns per 15 minutes. But usually his fights, I mean, he gets less than 1 takedown per fight because his fights are such a short period of time. That number per 15 minutes looks more than it is. He's more than 60% of Oleinik's fights take place in control time, though. He's controlling his opponent's 37.65, and he's being controlled about 24%. While Spivak is controlling his opponents twice as much as they're controlling him at 36% compared to 17% against. Spivak's takedown defense has been 75%. It's going to need to be good if he's going to not wind up under Aleksei Oleinik and keep this striking, to keep it standing, where he'll definitely have an advantage. The ratios are similar, but Spivak has been fighting the less experienced competition, but they're both fighting tough fighters. 1.43 ratio for Oleinik, 1.38 for Spivak. Spivak losing to very impressive competition with an average record of 3 and less than 1 loss. So a 4.5 ratio there. And the losses, Oleinik's losing to the slightly better competition, but the Walt Harris loss doesn't look good on the ratio because he's actually lost a lot more fights than he's won in the UFC. I think he's something like 5-8. So yeah, but wins over Tuivasa, Felipe, Vandera, very impressive. And Aleksei, he got that win by split decision over Fabricio Verdum, showed some great conditioning in that fight. He subbed the bum Maurice Green. He lost to Walt Harris as well. So the MMA math is pretty much the same there. I like Spivak's youth here. I think he's not going to be easy to take down. And I honestly think that if he does get on top of Oleinik, he could probably ground and pound him out. We've seen Spivak's top game is absolutely legit. His ground and pound is terrifying. And if he hurts Oleinik, he might follow him down to the ground, and it might not be the worst idea because it probably wouldn't take him long to finish him out there. Oleinik, 75 professional fights, a lot of tread on those tires, and this kid Spivak is no joke. I'm leaning Spivak. I would rather bet the inside the distance and parlay it than maybe just betting Spivak. If you bet Spivak straight, you might want to hedge it with a Oleinik by sub prop. Might be a good way to limit your loss if Oleinik does pull off the sub. And we know he's always live for it at 59 wins with a 78% sub. Christ, this guy's 37 wins by submission. Is that right?
It's a ton.
That's so many, it's crazy. So yeah, dude, I gotta feel like this is gonna be Sergey's fight. He's much younger. He's a much better striker, and I just think he's more well-rounded at this point than Oleinik. He's just got to stay out of the submission.
Yeah, Nick mentions a good point. Like Oleinik, his path to victory is a first-round sub, and probably a first-round sub only. This guy has no gas tank whatsoever. Really no chin at this point as well. The only concern I have is I don't think Spivak's some murderous power puncher, but even then, I feel like he can get him out of there. I just don't know if it'll be like a couple punches and Oleinik's out. So I'll take Spivak as well. Fairly confident in it, but I do think there's probably some other ways to bet it. Even like if you like Spivak at minus 240 or minus 250, whatever he's at, you might as well bet him inside the distance at minus 145. Like that's not horrible. I don't see this fight going the distance, and the fight doesn't go to decision line. Oh my goodness, I don't know if you're parlaying this. It's minus 565. That's one of the biggest probably of the year. And that's usually what we see in Oleinik fights. We see fight doesn't get decision lines this big. So the over-under set at 1.5 as it should be. The under is juiced to under 1 to minus 155 for the under 1.5. I don't know if I feel comfortable with it, but I do think it hits. Like I said, the only thing that concerns me is Spivak is just not some murderous power puncher like a Walt Harris, like an Overeem, like guys like that. But I do think he does get Oleinik out of there. I'm going to say either second round, early third round. I just don't think Oleinik has the gas tank to go more than about a round and a half. So I think the under is set at an appropriate line. Maybe like the fight does not start round 3 could be something to look at. But I think my play is probably going to be Spivak inside the distance, maybe hedge it with like an Oleinik round 1. So the pick for me is Spivak, and I'm definitely going to be sticking with that. But we will get to the next fight, which is going to be a very good one. Very fun. We have Tim Means, going against Danny Roberts. Tim Means is 37 years old, 6'2", 75-inch reach. Danny Roberts is 33 years old, going to be 4 years younger, 6'1", 74-inch reach. So another guy that has been taking quite a bit of a layoff. Danny Roberts, we have not seen him fight for a while, it seems like. Going against Tim Means, who just beat Mike Perry. I think he was like an underdog in that fight as well, and he also beat Lariana Staropoli. He lost to Daniel Rodriguez by submission in a fight where he got hurt bad, and Rodriguez ended up submitting him. He won by submission against Thiago Alves, and then lost by knockout to Nico Price. As far as Danny Roberts, he beat Zalim Imadaev. Just got done watching that fight earlier today by knockout. He lost to Michel Pereira. It was like a flying knee that rocked him, and then he put him down with a nice punch. He lost to Claudia Silva by submission. I believe it was in that third round. He beat David Zawada by a split decision, and then he got a knockout win prior to that by NCOM. So I guess what sticks out to me, and we'll see if the stats back this up, is a lot of these fights, especially on the Roberts side, they're ending inside the distance. I don't think he's ever won by decision. So, got done taping this one, and right off the bat, what stuck out to me was going to be that under line. So Uncle Weezy, let's see if your stats back up that take that I think it ends on the distance.
Yeah, Danny Roberts fought 3 times in 2019. His last fight was in November of 2019. So it's been almost, about a year and 9 months now the layoff has been for Roberts. Means is old. He's 37 years old, but Roberts is 33. Roberts is a southpaw, Means orthodox. We got Means with a big-time experience advantage here, 45 professional fights as opposed to 22 for Roberts, but they're both experienced. Tim Means 23 fights in the UFC. Danny Roberts has 10. Almost triple the cage time for Tim Means over Roberts. So, obviously Means is the more experienced mixed martial artist, and he's been a lot more active lately, as we know that. If I go to the advanced stats here, I could see that, the last fight was against Imadaev, but for Means, he had 3 fights in 2020 and 2 fights in 2019. So, he's fought 3 times against Mike Perry, Lariano Staropoli, and Daniel Rodriguez. He's had 3 fights in between the last time Danny Roberts fought. And, all 3 of those guys are, mid-range welterweights. So, some impressive wins there. Well, he lost to Rodriguez, but that was a great fight. So if we go to the numbers here, we see that Tim Means overall has a 77% finish rate, and in the UFC he's got a 51% finish rate. Most of them coming by TKO. He gets some subs. Danny Roberts overall has a 76% sub rate, and he has, out of his 6 wins, he has finished 4 of them. 3 of them by KO, 1 of them by sub. So 2 of Danny Roberts' victories have come by decision. So if we look at the striking stats, we see that Tim Means has a 48% striking accuracy, 44% for Danny Roberts. Definitely the volume advantage goes to Means with 10.73 significant strikes attempted. He lands 5.16. While Roberts lands 3.45 out of 7.79. They both have got some power. Danny Roberts lands a knockdown on over 1% of his significant strikes, while it's 0.76% for Means. And they both get knocked down a little bit, but Danny Roberts has been a victim of a few more knockdowns than Tim Means has. While Danny Roberts has been knocked down on 1.55% of the significant strikes landed against him. So that means he's been knocked down 5 times in 10 fights in 258 significant strikes landed. So definitely Roberts seems to be a little more chinny. Not a great thing to be against Tim Means, a guy who's, landed a lot of strikes and landed a lot of knockdowns, probably about 9 knockdowns, if my math is correct here. So 9 knockdowns in 23 fights for Tim Means. And Danny Roberts has been knocked down 5 times in 10 fights. So definitely, Means has got some power, and Danny Roberts is shown to be chinny. When we look at the grappling statistics, Danny Roberts has only gotten 1 takedown in 10 fights. He's not really, he attempted 15 for a 6.67% takedown accuracy. I don't think we have to really worry about him taking Means down. Means has attempted only 34 takedowns in 23 fights. he's getting about 0.92 takedowns per 15 minutes, and he's got a 41% accuracy. So when Means shoots takedowns, he'll get them. Danny Roberts has shown the ability to be controlled. He only has a 53% takedown defense. So if Means wants to go to the grappling, it seems like there's an advantage there. He has only successfully defended 17 out of 32 takedowns against him as Danny Roberts. He's been taken down 2.71 times per 15 minutes. So if Tim doesn't like how this is going on the feet, it looks like Danny Roberts is a guy that you can put him on his ass. He's been controlled 30% of his UFC career. So we see that Tim Means, the total percent of his fights that take place in control time is about 26%. So he's clearly more comfortable standing. While Roberts, his fights have spent almost 50% in control time. I know Roberts is more comfortable striking, but his opponents have easily been able to get the fights to the mat. So he's a guy that can be controlled, and he's got 18% control time in his own right. So he's shown the ability to be able to control opponents as well. When we go to the strength of schedule, this is where we see an advantage for Means. A 1.26 ratio is compared to a 0.75 ratio for Danny Roberts, which is just telling us that when Danny Roberts does win in his 6 fights, he's not fighting guys that have more wins than losses. He's actually beating guys that have more losses than they have wins. Lower level UFC competition. And not only that, the average record of a Danny Roberts opponent is 2.1 wins and 2.8 losses, while Tim Means has an average record of his opponents of 6 wins and 4.83 losses. So Tim Means is fighting the better competition. He's fighting the competition that has a better win-loss ratio, and he's fighting more experienced competition. So a serious strength of schedule advantage from what my metrics are telling me. And if you look at the wins for the average record of a Danny Roberts opponent that he's beaten is 0.5 wins and 1.83 losses. Not good. So the numbers are telling us a giant strength of schedule advantage here for Tim Means. The numbers are telling us that Tim Means has a experience advantage, but he is 4 years older. That's not a good thing.
Yeah.
Tim Means is the better finisher. Well, yeah, they're both good finishers in their own right. But the thing about Danny Roberts is overall he has lost 5 fights in his career, and 3 of them came by KO and 2 of them came by sub. So every time Danny Roberts has lost, it's been by finish. So I see some really good things in the numbers here for Means. I see a power advantage. I see a grappling advantage. I see a potential control time advantage, and I see that he's fought a much better level of competition and beaten a much better level of competition. And then you throw in a 2-year layoff for Danny Roberts, while Tim Means has had 3 fights in the UFC since Danny Roberts has been out. What is Danny Roberts going to look like after this layoff? That's the question your Uncle Weezy can't answer for you. So we're going to have to figure that out on our own. But right now, this looks like a pretty solid spot for Tim Means.
Yep. I mean, I'm definitely on the Means side as well. Got done taping this one today. I mean, I don't really love the line. It's hard to kind of trust Tim Means, like on paper, the stats and all that back it up as well. I do think he's the better fighter. It's just the age kind of concerns me a little bit. I do think he is slowing down a little bit in his career. The layoff on Roberts has concerned me a little bit. So although I am picking Means to win, I don't know if I'll touch him at -200. I think that could be a little bit wide, but then again, I do think he does win this fight. He opened at -205, currently -200. Roberts opened at +165, currently +170. I guess what has me intrigued is going to be that under 2.5, which is +150, +155. Even the fight doesn't go to decision, +125, like you mentioned, and I think this is key. Danny Roberts has never lost a decision. 3 knockout losses, 2 submission losses. I think there's a very good opportunity that Means does get a finish, but on the flip side, we have seen Means dropped. We have seen Means knocked out before. Roberts is a finisher. Roberts does have some power, so maybe Roberts can knock out, Tim Means, who is, going towards the end of his career. So instead of laying the -200 on Means, I might be looking at some violence instead. But I am going to be picking Tim Means, and I do think he does get it done against Danny Roberts.
Yeah, and let me just jump in for a second here. The fight doesn't go to decision is a very good look because Means, if you look at how Roberts has lost his fights in the UFC, 4 losses, 3 of them by KO. and Means has definitely got power. But like you say, Danny Roberts' power numbers, you don't want to ignore them. I mean, he's landing a knockdown on over 1% of his significant strikes landed. Tim Means is 37 years old. So if you don't want to lay that kind of chalk on a 37-year-old man, even though there are a lot of numbers in his favor, probably, betting the fight doesn't go to decision would be a pretty good look.
Yeah, it's definitely something to look at, especially plus money. I mean, I think there's a good chance that this fight does finish. Before we get into the main event, if you guys can leave a like on this video, let's try to get 100 likes. We were able to get it last week, so thank you guys so much for that. We'll be going to be going live every Sunday, 7:15 p.m. Eastern Time, giving an early look into this week's card, going balls deep into the stats, balls deep into the matchup. It's a nice little preview to get our feet wet for the upcoming card, and it also helps me out a lot. Hopefully it does help you guys out a lot as well. But we will now get into the main event, and we have the Korean Zombie going against Dan Ige. We have Zombie, who is 34 years old, 5'7", 72-inch reach. Dan Ige, 29 years old, 5'7", 71-inch reach. I mean, this is a very, very interesting fight. We have Zombie, who is definitely getting up there in age. Zombie, who definitely did not have the best performance in his last fight. But if this fight was, say 2-3 years ago, I'd be all over the Korean Zombie, especially at this line, at a pick'em line. I'd be hammering it against Dan Ige here if this was 2-3 years ago. But the thing is, he is 34 years old. He is getting up there in age. Man, I don't know. I mean, is it the same Korean Zombie? He did not look great in his fight against Brian Ortega, where Brian Ortega had a ton of success in the striking, and it looked like Ortega definitely made improvements. It's just a horrible sign to get outstruck like that against Brian Ortega. I mean, it seemed like on paper it was a phenomenal matchup for the Korean Zombie, but he definitely dropped the ball. He got dominated in that fight. But prior to that, he did knock out Frankie Edgar. Very good win there. He did knock out Renato Moicano. Very good win there. Knockout loss to Yair Rodriguez, but if you go back and watch that fight, he was winning the fight up until a last second. I believe it was a spinning elbow that Yair Rodriguez pulled out of his ass to win that fight. And then he had a knockout win against Dennis Bermudez. And then as far as Dan Ige, he did knock out Gavin Tucker with the first 30 seconds of that fight. He did lose a decision to Calvin Kattar. He won a split decision over Edson Barbosa, a fight that a lot of people thought that Barbosa got it done. And then he also got a split decision over Mirsad Bektic, and then a win over Kevin Aguilar. So, on paper, you're looking at the last couple of opponents. It looks like you got a favorite Zombie. So what are you thinking here for the stats, Uncle Weezy?
Yeah, if you could go over to the advanced stats and go all the way up to the top where we have Korean Zombie, there's an interesting thing I just want to point out here. On August 3rd, 2013, Korean Zombie fought Jose Aldo, and he lost. Since August 3rd, 2013, this guy has fought 6 times in 8 years.
Crazy, yeah.
So, I try to look at how busy a fighter has been. He took basically 3.5 years off between the Aldo fight and the Bermudez fight, which I believe he was doing his military service. And, Korean Zombie is a really interesting fighter. I mean, he's slick on the ground. He's got way more power than people think he has. I mean, when that guy lands, people go down. Let's get into the numbers here, but I wanted to point out first that Korean Zombie has not been active. This guy's not fighting a lot. And if I were to go back to the advanced stats, you don't have to go back there, but if we look at Dan Ige and we see that he's been in the UFC, he started on July 25th, 2017. And between 2017 and now, this guy's got 11 fights. Okay, so he's got twice as many fights in 4 less years than Korean Zombie has since 2013. So he's just been way more active. He's just been fighting way more, and he's been fighting some really tough competition as well. But if we look at the career numbers, 22 fights for Zombie, 18 for Ige. We got very similar numbers in cage time. The records are pretty similar. Average fight time, very similar. Korean Zombie's career is twice as long as Ige's, but he has just 4 more fights. So that's what I was talking about in terms of Ige just being way more active. 10 UFC fights is compared to 9 for Zombie. Average fight time is pretty much the same. If we look at the finish stats, Dan Ige, 60% finisher, 33% by sub, 27% by KO overall, while Korean Zombie, 88% overall and 100% finish rate in his wins in the UFC. 1/3 coming by sub, so 2 sub wins, 4 knockouts. All of Korean Zombie's UFC wins have come by finish, but Dan Ige has never been finished in the UFC. And Korean Zombie has been finished in his 3 losses. He's lost 2 of them by KO, the other one by decision. If we go to the striking stats, we see some numbers that are actually pretty similar. 3.94 for Zombie, landed out of 9.71, and Dan Ige 3.95 out of 8.49. Ige a little more accurate, Zombie with a little more power, but both of these guys showing some power. Zombie 1.02% knockdown per total significant strikes landed ratio, while Ige at 0.87%, so both pretty good there. Both a little over a half knockdown per 15 minutes, both showing power. Both have been knocked down. Zombie 0.45 times per 15 minutes, while Ige's only been 0.13. Both of these guys landing more than they get hit. Both guys right around 55% striking defense for Zombie, while it's 59 for Ige. If we go into the grappling statistics, we see that Dan Ige has been committing to the wrestling a lot more than Korean Zombie has. He's got 47 takedown attempts in 10 fights. He's gotten 13% of those 47 or 13 takedowns out of 47 for 27.66%, while Korean Zombie's got 5 out of 12 for 41%. Dan Ige gets a little more than twice as many takedowns per 15 minutes. They both attempt about the same amount of submissions. And both of these guys, 21% total control time, 22 actually, for Korean Zombie in his fights between what they get controlled and what they control their opponents, and 28% for Ige. So both of these guys, over 70% of their fights take place standing in the middle of the cage. I think that's going to favor Zombie a little bit more. If we look at the strength of schedule, we can see that Zombie's got the better ratio and has been fighting the more experienced competition overall, wins and losses. So, what I'm thinking here is that the numbers are actually pretty similar for both of these guys. I like the fact that Ige's been more active. I like the fact that Ige's 5 years younger. I like the fact that Ige's on the upswing of his career, while Korean Zombie is most likely, plateauing or going towards the downside of his. But it's so hard to know with Korean Zombie. This guy's not fighting often. So I don't really feel comfortable betting on him or against him until, I get some more information about, how active has this guy been? Is he training all the time? Where's he at? Why haven't we seen him since that Ortega fight? I know it was an ass kicking, but that fight, that was when? Let me see.
October, maybe?
That fight was, it was October 17th, 2020. So, it's not that long ago, I guess. But he got the crap kicked out of him there. He landed 62 significant strikes, and he got landed on 127 times. 2 knockdowns. Ortega even got 3 takedowns against him. But Ortega's fighting for the title. So I just don't know what to think of Zombie here. Like I say, 3 fights in the last 3 years, but they're against Ortega, Edgar, and Moicano, and then that war against Rodriguez. So he's a very exciting fighter. I would bet that this probably isn't going to decision because both of these dudes are pretty good finishers. And they're both pretty active. I don't really see much of either one of them taking much time off. But, Zombie's super tough.
Yeah.
And we know that Ige, they kind of started giving him some tough competition right off the bat. And, boy, they put him in the deep end, and he started swimming beautifully. So, I'm leaning Ige here. I think, Zombie's more explosive. I think he's more powerful. I think he's really tricky on the ground. But I like Ige's conditioning. I like the fact that he's younger, and I like the fact that he's been busier lately, and sometimes, this is something that I've been thinking about, and that's, when people get to different points in their careers, they have different motivations. Somebody like Ige, he looks at this Korean Zombie fight as like, hey, I win this fight. Ortega beat Zombie, and now he's fighting for the title. So, Ige might be thinking, hey, why not me? But if Zombie beats Ige, he's not getting a title shot. So I don't know where I don't know where Zombie's motivation is. I don't know how active he's been training. He hasn't been fighting much. And because of those reasons, I'm leaning Ige because I'm not seeing enough in the statistics on Zombie's side to tell me, yeah, I'm seeing a really big advantage here over Ige. I don't really see an advantage anywhere except for that strength of schedule, which is really good, but it's not like Ige's been fighting bums.
Yeah, man. I mean, this fight is it's tough to call because, like I said, if this fight was a couple of years ago, man, I'd be hammering the Korean Zombie. But the fact of the matter is, he is 34 years old. I guess he's been having interviews talking about potentially retiring, saying his heart's not in it right now. It's just not things you want to hear if you want to put your hard-earned money on this guy. It's a tough fight. We're going to do a main event deep dive tomorrow on my channel, so check that out tomorrow. I think we're going to post it hopefully tomorrow by the afternoon, but we're going to go really deep into the stats on this particular fight, really get into it. But just to sum it up, I'm probably going to go with Dan Ige. I need to get into the tape a little bit more, but I do think that it was just a really big red flag. I know it's Brian Ortega. He's fighting for a title, but to just get outclassed by him on the feet like that, it wasn't a great look. It just did not look like the Korean Zombie that we know and love. It just looked like a Korean Zombie who his heart's not in it. It looked like he has slowed down a lot in his career. And I don't know, 34 years old. I'm going to have to go with the younger guy as far as a pick, but I'm just staying far away from this one as a betting perspective. And we'll kind of take a look at the odds here. It is a straight pick, a minus 110 each way. Honestly, I don't really see that line moving. I think it pretty much should be a pick. And as far as the fight goes to decision, it is minus 125. Fight doesn't go to decision, minus 115. The over 4.5 rounds, minus 130. The under 4.5 rounds is plus 100. I don't know. I mean, both guys are very tough, but I can just see this being an all-out war. I wouldn't be shocked if somebody got finished, but man, both guys are very, very tough. I'll pick Ige. I don't love it because, man, I hate writing off fighters. Like I kind of wrote off Ponzinibbio the other week, and he made me eat my words because, man, did he look very, very good. So I don't really want to write off Chan Sung Jung off of one bad performance, but it's just not a great look. So I got to go with Ige, but would I be shocked if we got, the same Korean Zombie that fought Edgar, the same Korean Zombie that fought Moicano Rodriguez? No, but it was just such a bad look, and it just left a really bad taste in my mouth after the last fight that I'm ultimately going to be going with the younger fighter, the 29-year-old, and Dan Ige, somebody that is definitely in his prime.
Yeah, and Zombie's been training at Fight Ready MMA, evidently. I think that's a new look for him.
Oh, wow.
I know that he was training out of Korea for a very long time.
Big.
So that's a gym that's been they've been on fire lately. So that's a good look for Zombie. And since we haven't seen him in 9 months, if he's at Fight Ready, that's something that could tell us, all right, maybe this guy he's training with some tough dudes, and maybe he's going to be ready for this fight. I'm leaning Ige, but this is going to be a hell of a fight. And under 4.5 at plus 100, even money. I don't mind that. Both these guys got power. Both of these guys have got some slick grappling, and they're both exceedingly tough. But that kind of a pace is going to be hard to keep up for 5 rounds. So, you could see a finish here. Both of these guys are finishers. That would be the thing that I want to lean on. But, before we do our main event breakdown, I'm definitely going to do some tape study. I want to kind of dive into this a little bit deeper so that we've got some more information for the people when we break this down, either late night tonight or tomorrow morning.
Heck yeah, man. But yeah, it was a fun breakdown. We went about 2 hours and 18 minutes. We have 13 fights on this card. We're supposed to have 14, but we did lose, I believe, the Tyson Nam fight. But I do want to say thank you all so much for hanging out. We had a consistent, nearly 100 in here all night hanging with us. I'm getting an early look for the card. Hopefully it did help you guys out. Dirty Reg says, time for dinner. I agree. I'm starving since like 12, but so what we got going on, so Tuesday on Pub Sports Radio here, 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, I will be going live talking some betting and DFS. Tomorrow on my channel, DFS by the Numbers, me and Uncle Weezy are going to be doing a full or a main event breakdown, going balls deep into that. And then on Tuesday on my channel, we're doing a full card breakdown and prediction. And other than that, I'll have some live streams on my channel next week as well, or this week as well, on Friday and Saturday. And I think that's about it for me. You can follow me on Twitter, DFS_numbers. Instagram is DFS by the numbers. Be sure to please leave a like on the video. We do put a lot of time and effort into this. It's not easy coming on here on a Sunday. Uncle Weezy, I know he puts a lot of time. He had to work really hard. He has a ton of stats to get done. So, Uncle Weezy, I'll let you shout out what you got going on, and then we'll head out of here.
Yeah, man, thanks for having me on again. Thanks to Pub Sports Radio for giving us a platform to do this show and provide you guys with all the stats and get you an early look into these fights so that we can make some damn good gambling decisions as the week goes on. You can check me out at my YouTube channel, Uncle Weezy. I do balls deep breakdowns on usually a few fights every week. Some of the ones that I think have some compelling statistics. I know I'm going to be looking at Vera Grant really hard this week. I'm going to be looking at the Brown Lima fight is going to be interesting. I'm going to definitely do a video on Verna Jandaroba, Rosa Choi. There's some really interesting fights on this card. I'm going to have to really go through the stats and pick out which ones that I feel will have some compelling information for you all. But check out my channel. I'd love for you guys to watch my videos, and I've got a lot more to come. So thanks for having me on again. Thanks to everybody that spent the time with us here. I appreciate each and every one of you.
Sounds good, Uncle Weezy. So we will see you guys next week at the same time, every week, 7:15 p.m. Eastern Time. Be sure to leave a like on your way out, and we will see you on Tuesday for the live stream on Pub Sports. Good luck, everybody, and let's make some money on UFC Vegas 29.